Good morning to everybody joining from the US and good afternoon to everyone joining from Germany. Welcome to the German-Puerto Rican Renewable Energy Conference. It's a great honor to host this great event today, and we have a great speaker lineup. I will walk you briefly through some housewarming rules, then quickly through the agenda, and then I will hand over to our CEO for the welcome remarks. So please note that you are on Zoom meeting, so you will be able to see everybody on here. You will also have the opportunity to have your microphones unmuted. We, of course, ask you to please keep them muted when you're not speaking. Please also note that the session is being recorded. And if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box, especially for our speakers. You can address them to us, and then the moderator, which will be me, will read them aloud. If you're interested in our companies that we are presenting today or learning anything more about the presentations that we're showing, please feel free to reach out to us. That is info@gaccsouth.com for any questions. My name is Leslie Southard. I'm a project manager at the consulting department of the German American Chamber of Commerce. I will be walking you through our program today. So just to very briefly walk you through our program for today, we will have some opening remarks and a quick introduction that will be provided by our own CEO and president of the German American Chamber of Commerce of the Southern United States. We will also have a quick introduction by Mr. Christoph Wunsch, our project partner in Germany and a consultant on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action in Germany. And then also from Mr. Laboy, the former secretary of the Department of Economic Development and Commerce in Puerto Rico, and the executive director of the Central Office for Recovery, Reconstruction, and Resilience. After that, we will move on to our first block. Please note that this conference is sorted into two blocks. So the first one will focus on transforming the grid, so the status quo in Puerto Rico and paving the way to a stable grid and 100% renewable energies. We have wonderful presentations by both research institutes and industry associations. Then we will, of course, have some presentations by our German delegates and that you will hear a little bit more about in a second. And then we will conclude every block with a panel discussion. After a quick coffee break, we will move on to the second block, which focuses on transatlantic cooperation and future solutions for 100% renewable energy. So taking a small look into the future, we again have representatives from research and industry. And after our company presentations, we'll conclude that with a panel discussion and wonderful closing remarks by the former Secretary of State of Puerto Rico. We are very honored to have such great speakers here, but without further ado, we would like to get started. So it is my great pleasure to announce our welcome remarks by our CEO, Matthias Hoffmann.
Yeah, good morning, buenos dias, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon to those of you joining us from the other side of the Atlantic from Germany. So as Leslie has mentioned, I'm Matthias Hoffmann, President and CEO of the German American Chamber of Commerce of the Southern US, and on behalf of the GACC South, as we say, I would like to welcome you, our speakers, our delegates, and of course the audience to our German-Puerto Rican Energy Conference. So we're really pleased to present to you today our current developments in the Puerto Rican energy sector, as well as technology solutions made in Germany throughout all of today's events. But for those of you who haven't been familiar with our chambers here in the US, I would like to start with a brief introduction. So the German American Chambers of Commerce here in the US represent German industry and trade throughout the country. We have three chambers in Atlanta, in New York, and in Chicago, as well as on the both coasts in San Francisco on the West Coast and in Washington, DC on the East Coast. And in total, we are a part of a network of 150 German chambers of commerce in 92 countries across the globe. And of course, there we support German technologies abroad, and we connect you to stakeholders in key markets such as automotive, the air and space industry, but of course, as we are here today all together in the energy sector and with a special focus on renewable energies. So our Southern Chamber here is of course proud to also represent Puerto Rico and not only the mainland of the US. So Puerto Rico, speaking of it, has a very ambitious goal of sourcing 100% of its energy by renewable energies by 2050. And of course, it's logical and also a brave decision. And 2050 actually seems far away, but it's quite around the corner if you talk about what is necessary in terms of infrastructure and transition work to be done. So it shows that there's an urgent need for low carbon and energy efficient technologies. And we see that also in Germany, where we call the whole transition here the Energiewende. And I believe that the goal of running 100% on renewables and providing clean energy access can only be achieved by conferences like that, where we bring together communities, countries, and also private companies to work together and create that momentum, which can be a truly game-changing way to transition to our energy needs. So we are excited that our German technologies could be part of the transition in Puerto Rico. And of course, we would also love to see Puerto Rican business thrive in Germany as well. So today, we came together and basically you will meet 7 delegates here from Germany, all of them in the energy sector, especially in the renewable energy sector, and all of them are eager to connect with you and tackle basically the energy transition in Puerto Rico. So we are proud to have our delegates show you prime examples of the German SME powerhouse and to do our part basically in bringing the both sides of the Atlantic together. So our mission of strengthening German Puerto Rican cooperation is also reflected then in our speakers presenting for us on behalf and of highly regarded German and US Puerto Rican companies, associations, research institute, that can learn, work, and grow together then. So thank you very much for joining today. And I would like to give a special thank you, of course, to our project partner of today's event and the whole project here, the representative of our German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy Transition, Mr. Christoph Wunsch. He's going to introduce the German Energy Solutions Initiative, which made this event here possible and which is a key of our German export programs for more than decades now and very successful. Last but not least, I want to thank all of you, our audience, for joining us today. It's really great that you have the willingness to meet our delegates and your openness to new technologies and of course opportunities for this conference. So with that, I wish you all the best in today's presentations and discussions, and I hope that you will gain a new perspective, relationships, and potential partnerships with the others here today. So the partnerships you build today will build the future of Puerto Rico and the future of renewable energies worldwide. So thank you for your attention, and I'll give it back to Leslie.
Thank you very much, Matthias. And now, as announced, I would like to hand over to Mr. Christoph Wunsch, Project Director of Climate Change at our partner organization in Germany, RAACH, and he will be representing the Federal Ministry for us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leslie. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, also thank you to Mr. Hoffmann for those kind introductory words. As mentioned, my name is Christoph Wunsch. I'm with the Renewables Academy, RAACH. We are one of the facilitators of the German Energy Solutions Initiative. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to our audience today, also on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. I have now 5 minutes to present. My presentation is divided in 2 sections. I would quickly like to introduce you to the German Energy Solutions Initiative, and then I have a few slides prepared to set the stage for the to explain to you the German energy transition, which is a wider set of policies and initiatives that the German government has taken for the last 30 years to push forward the introduction and the introduction of renewable energies into our energy system. So the German Energy Solutions Initiative now is celebrating its 20th anniversary, as it is based on a parliament decision from 2002. The initiative aims to support small and medium enterprises to distribute their smart and sustainable energy solutions worldwide, and by this to contribute to international climate protection. The initiative would like to facilitate business partnerships, especially in the field of renewable energies, energy efficiency technologies, smart grids, green hydrogen, and storage technologies. Next slide, please. With the initiative, we offer, for once, information about German energy solutions. We offer networking and business opportunities with German companies, both in your country and in Germany. We want to contribute to knowledge exchange, and we showcase flagship projects around the world. Next slide, please. You can find a wide range of information on the international section of our website, germanenergysolutions.de. I think this is interesting for you, especially with the online database, where you will find profiles and contact information of German companies or German technology providers. You would find latest information about German energy solutions, new developments. Of course, you can stay tuned to upcoming events of the initiative that are nearby your location, and you can subscribe to the monthly newsletter. Next slide, please. In terms of networking and business opportunities, we offer energy trade missions to your country, which take place either in person or virtually. We are hoping to move back slowly but surely to the in-person events. Today we offer a one-day seminar followed by individual business meetings, which are then implemented or organized by our partners, the chambers of commerce abroad. The initiative also takes part in foreign trade fairs with the German pavilion, where you have German exhibitors, an information forum, and side events. Please stay tuned to our website as well for events that take place in the Northern American region. Next slide, please. So with having introduced the German Energy Solutions Initiative, I'd like to talk a little bit about the German energy transition. As mentioned already, it's a process that has taken place for more than 30 years already, with the federal government introducing policy and regulations to foster the introduction of renewable energies to our energy system. Next slide, please. The energy transition, which we call in German Energiewende, combines the security of supply, cost effectiveness, and environmental protection. So what you see here is the energy policy triangle. So we'd like to watch all those three aspects: environmentally sound, secure and reliable, as well as affordable and cost-effective energy. Next slide, please. The energy transition is Germany's long-term energy and climate strategy. So here you see the targets the German government has set in terms of greenhouse gas reduction, renewable energies, and energy efficiency measures. So you always see on the left-hand side versus which numbers we actually compare. So the greenhouse gas emissions versus 1990 levels are to be reduced to greenhouse gas neutrality by the year 2045. In 2021, Germany had already achieved a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions versus 1990 levels of about 40%. Renewable energy, of course, plays a major role in the transformation of the energy system. So Germany is aiming to have 80% of renewables within the electricity mix by the year 2030. In 2021, already more than 42% of electricity in Germany was generated from renewable sources. Also, renewables are to play a bigger part in the gross final energy consumption, as we are not only looking at electricity production, but also at the transport sector, at heating and cooling, the building sector and industry. So also in the final energy consumption, Germany is aiming to have 60% renewables in the mix by 2050. The next, I think the slides will be shared with you, so you can look at more details later on. So I would move on to the next slide. Here you see the installed capacity of renewables that were installed in that existed in 2020 in Germany. And here you only see those that are actually grid connected. You see that the largest share is from wind energy. The second largest is from photovoltaics. And in 2020 alone, Germany added 4.4 gigawatts of generation capacity to its energy mix. Also, a slightly lesser part is played by bioenergy and offshore wind. Next slide, please. The energy transition is only possible since it's widely supported by the German population. The most recent survey from 2021 showed that 92% of the German population actually support the energy transition. And on the right-hand side, you can also see that German households are stocking up on renewable energy technologies. So you see that every 11th household already has a solar PV or solar thermal installation. Also, every 11th household has a heat pump installed. To a smaller degree, electric vehicles are being introduced, wood pellet heating, for example, battery storage, or combined heat and power units in households. Next slide, please. Here you see some of the macroeconomic effects that the energy transition has in Germany, or actually worldwide. The energy transition does trigger investments. It does add regional value as the energy transition or renewable energy technologies are of a decentralized nature. You do trigger innovation, as in Germany, for example, more than 1,000 patents per year are filed within the renewable energy and energy efficiency technology sectors. The energy transition has positive employment effects. Right now in Germany, about 320,000 people are employed in the renewable energy sector. Another issue that is quite especially recently quite important is, of course, the reduction for your need for energy imports, and by this securing your energy supply. And of course, we should look at environmental and health benefits due to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And yeah, with the last slide, you will have our contact details. The project manager or the project lead for the Northern American region is Laura Scharlach. You have her contact details here. And yeah, I wish everyone a successful conference. I'm looking forward to many interesting presentations and technologies. And yeah, thank you for your attention, and back to you, Leslie.
Thank you so much, Christoph. I very much appreciate it. And I think it was great for our Puerto Rican listeners to also learn a little bit about the German energy transition. So I think this is a development that we're witnessing in on both sides of the Atlantic, and so great to have that shared today. So now we will move on to the Puerto Rican side, actually, and hear more about current energy developments and government-funded projects. And we are very honored to have Senor Manuel Laboy with us today. He is both the former Secretary of the Department of Economic Development and Commerce and Executive Director of the Puerto Rico Industrial Development Company in Puerto Rico, and the current Executive Director of the Central Office for Recovery, Reconstruction, and Resilience. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak for us today, Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you for the German-American Chamber of Commerce for the invitation. Very honored to be part of this event today. So I'm going to be talking about what's happening in Puerto Rico and what is the future that we expect. in terms of the transformation of our infrastructure, specifically the electrical grid, and the foundation towards achieving our goal to be 100% dependent on renewable clean energy by 2050. First of all, it is important to understand roles and responsibilities. What Core 3 does in this reconstruction with the federal funds, specifically the ones provided by FEMA. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Administration, is the federal entity that has the statutory mandate to address emergency response and disaster recovery in the 50 states and the US territories, including Puerto Rico. They are the ones that provide the oversight. They are the ones that provide the framework to claim funds for damaged facilities to restore, to replace, or to repair what was damaged by a disaster, in the Puerto Rico case, a hurricane and also earthquakes, but also provide funds to invest in the future of resiliency, to mitigate future hazards. In the case of the Core 3, which is the Central Office for Recovery, Reconstruction, and Resiliency, it was created in 2017. It's a state entity in the case of Puerto Rico. And the reason it was created, it was because of the magnitude and the devastation that happened after Hurricane Maria. It was anticipated that billions of funds from FEMA were going to be invested in Puerto Rico in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Therefore, there was no precedent in managing such funds at this level. And Core 3 was created to ensure that we support the municipalities, the state agencies, the public corporations, and certain nonprofits that are eligible to receive these funds. So everything is done in accordance with federal, state, and local laws and regulations, that we provide the technical assistance throughout the whole implementation of projects, ensuring that the reconstruction happens in terms of the resiliency that is expected, and of course, in full compliance and in full transparency. But the ones who execute the projects are those municipalities, are those state agencies, public corporations, and nonprofits. They execute the projects, and we support the whole process, including the disbursement of funds in the form of reimbursements. Next. Now, it is important to state that, yes, we started in 2017. It's been a long journey. The path for disaster recovery and reconstruction has been full of challenges. But the important thing here is that 2021 was the turning point, the year that we finally had enough funds and enough obligated projects to actually move forward with the reconstruction. It is such that we anticipate that in 2022, it is the year that we finally will have at least 2,000 projects in construction or near construction related to the permanent work. There is work that was done between 2017 and 2019 related to emergency work, temporary in nature, necessary to stabilize the economy and to stabilize the infrastructure. But the actual work that will infuse resiliency, the work that is going to be done in accordance with codes and standards and industry best practices, is starting now. And at the core of that is the restoration of the electrical grid. Next. Now we're talking about a lot of money, and they are basically two programs that we administer at Core 3, funds that are provided by FEMA. The number one program is public assistance. This is the program that provides funds, again, to restore, to repair, or to replace facilities and infrastructure that were damaged by a disaster, in this case, the Hurricane Maria. And in this program, so far, FEMA has obligated or approved more than $27 billion. And of that $27 billion, around 21 billion are related to permanent work that is resilient. The other funds are related to emergency work. And of that, we have overall disbursed around $5 billion and it tells you that this is the year that it all starts, and it will be under reconstruction, Puerto Rico, the whole island, of the next 10, 15 years. We have close to 8,000 projects that are already being obligated by FEMA. We expect that this number will increase all the way to 10,000 all around the island. And that includes utilities such as the electrical grid and generation, water and sewer. It includes also roads and bridges. It includes public schools, healthcare facilities. It includes also sports and recreational facilities, and everything that was eligible in terms of infrastructure, including also ports, maritime ports and airports and so forth. Next. Now, like I said, it is the actual agency or the public corporation that executes the projects. So how these funds are distributed. The number one entity that has the funding in terms of public assistance is the Puerto Rico Power Authority. It has basically half of the funds that have been obligated by FEMA. And when you combine the funds that have been obligated for the water and sewer infrastructure and the public schools in Puerto Rico, altogether, you have 74% of all the funds. So between these three public corporations and state agency, basically you have 3/4 of the reconstruction under these three entities. Now you have another 7, 8 state agencies and public corporations that have the other 11%. You have there the University of Puerto Rico, you have the Public Housing Administration, you have the Department of Transportation and Public Works, the Puerto Rico Industrial Development Company, the Department of Health, and others that altogether, combined with the top 3, as we call it, have basically 85% of the funds. Now you have the municipalities that has another $2.4 billion worth of funds obligated. It represents 11% of the funds, but they do represent 75% of all the projects around the island. And then another 4% distributed among other smaller agencies and NGOs, the non-governmental organizations. I'm going to focus the rest of the presentation, of course, in the electrical grid restoration. Next. So $10.5 billion. That's the money that has been obligated by FEMA to reconstruct the electrical grid. Needless to say, this has no precedent in the United States and in Puerto Rico. There's no other recovery in the United States that has this amount of money, that has this level of complexity, and therefore there's no other reconstruction in terms of utilities and infrastructure in the United States that will have the impact that these funds will have in a jurisdiction like Puerto Rico. The funds are distributed based on the category of assets. So as you can see, 85% of the funds will be directed to the restoration of the transmission and distribution system. Why is that? Because this program is to address what was damaged by the hurricane, although it will be reconstructed based again, on current codes and standards, industry best practices, and of course, the degree of resiliency that is needed. So when another hurricane comes to Puerto Rico, it will be hardened and it will sustain the next disaster. So the transmission and distribution component of our system was the one that was severely damaged as compared to generation or telecommunications or even buildings and water parts, the assets related to water for the electrical power system. So we're going to be focusing on the transmission and distribution restoration. It is important also to state that the $10.5 billion, there's an opportunity to increase that amount of money if we can justify project by project to FEMA measures related to mitigate future hazards. So there's a potential of adding maybe hundreds of millions of additional funds on top of the 10.5 billion, although that will be determined, like I said, on a project by project basis. Once the Power Authority, and in this case also Luma Energy, which is the agent of the public corporation managing the transmission and distribution, they justify this additional funds related to hazard mitigation. Next. Now, there's a lot of money on the paper, a lot of money, but this has to translate into action. And that's part of our focus in Core 3 is to support Luma Energy and the Puerto Rico Power Authority to ensure that all those funds get out of the piece of paper and they get into the streets. They get into actual reconstruction projects. And the first step that is required in order to actually move forward is that every project related to the energy system has to be approved by our independent energy regulator. Puerto Rico has an independent energy regulator. It's called the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau. They are the ones in charge of a law that is known as Act 17-2019, which is our state energy public policy. That is the law that provides the roadmap. So Puerto Rico can get to 100% renewable clean energy by 2050 based on milestones. It is the law that also establishes the roadmap for energy efficiency and energy conservation. Therefore, every project needs to be approved by this bureau to ensure that it is all aligned into that ultimate goal. The good news is that the bureau has already approved almost $8 billion worth of projects, more than 250 projects and programs related to the restoration of the transmission and distribution system and the facilities related to that are not related to transmission and distribution, including generation. Once that happens, the next step is to then develop the engineering and architectural drawings and specifications for every project in order to then obtain the permitting and in order to submit to FEMA so they can have a final blessing so they can go to construction. The good news is that so far, at least 85 projects worth around $1.5 billion are already in the stages of engineering, design, development on the transmission distribution. And on the non-transmission distribution assets, around 28 projects close to $500 million are in that stage of engineering and design. Today, there's around 24 projects that are being already presented to FEMA under their consideration so they can approve and then go ahead for the blessing for construction. As a matter of fact, yesterday, we announced the very first 2 projects for the distribution and transmission system to start replacing poles and street lights in a few municipalities in Puerto Rico. And that is the commencement of dozens of projects that will be approved by FEMA on a monthly basis so they can go to construction. We expect that at least 60 projects combined, T&D and non-T&D, worth at least $500 million will be in construction on some stages related to construction before the end of this year, 2022, marking the real beginning of the reconstruction in a resilient way of our electrical system. Now, it is important before I go to the next slide that every expert, including the Bureau, the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, has stated that in order to ensure that we integrate the renewables technologies today and into the future of the next 10, 20, 30 years, we need a resilient electrical grid. And that resilient electrical grid will be achieved with these funds. Next. Now, I mentioned that there's another program by FEMA that we also administer, which is to mitigate future hazards. The prior funds that I just mentioned is to address the damages that were caused by a disaster, in this case, Hurricane Maria. But we also have close to $4 billion to mitigate future hazards. So combined, there's this ultimate incredible opportunity to really, really modernize our infrastructure, in this case, our electrical power system, based again on resiliency and climate change. In the case of this program, there are at least 4 projects that are right now being evaluated and or under development with funds already allocated by FEMA. There are 2 projects related to dams and also an early warning system related to dams that are already on the engineering and design stages, close to $700 million. And there are 2 projects that are now being under development by the Puerto Rico Power Authority with the support of the Department of Energy, the U.S. Department of Energy, and Core 3, based on generation on the north region of Puerto Rico from the perspective of resiliency and climate resiliency. Now, there are other projects that are in the works that will be announced, in the near future, that also will be supported by this program related to hydroelectric generation, microgrids, and marine ocean energy that are being proposed from the government of Puerto Rico to FEMA for the appropriate funding. Next. So this is the final slide. Again, we are in the path on transforming and modernizing our infrastructure for a more resilient and competitive Puerto Rico. And we're basically paving the way so we can get 100% clean energy and renewable energy by 2050 with these federal funds focused on the resiliency of our electrical grid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Laboy Rivera. I really appreciate your time today and sharing a little bit about Puerto Rico's path that our German companies would love to be a part of. And without further ado, I would now like to introduce our first topic block. It's on transforming the grid, the status quo in Puerto Rico and paving the way. And our first speaker and also later the panel moderator for today is Mr. PJ Wilson from the Solar Energy and Storage Association of Puerto Rico. Mr. Wilson has many, many years of experience as a clean energy advocate, and we are very excited to have him tell us a little bit more about the work of CESA, the organization, Industry Association on Puerto Rico today. Thank you so much for joining us, and the stage is yours.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you wonderfully. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Well, thank you for putting this event together, Leslie, and it's an honor to be speaking after you, Mr. Laboy. I'm going to be talking with you today about solar and storage. I am the co-founder and director of the Puerto Rico Solar and Energy Storage Association of Puerto Rico. Most people refer to us as CESA. And let's see, do I just tell you when I go to the next slide, Leslie? Okay, next slide.
Yes, yes, we will be clicking through it for you.
Okay, excellent. So before we get started, or at the beginning here, what is CESA? We are a nonprofit that is focused only on developing solar and storage on the island, primarily through promoting public policy. We support the expansion of solar and storage at all scales, from residential all the way up to the utility scale projects, commercial and industrial, microgrids, everything in between. Puerto Rico is a very unique place where storage is particularly important because of the state of the power grid. And we're very concerned that we're only about at 3% renewable energy right now, and at the same time, very excited about all of the things that are in the works that you might be interested in to know about that should result in lots more solar and storage coming on the grid soon. I'll also mention that we are the local affiliate of SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association at the national level. They advocate for solar at the national level, and we are one of the 21 affiliates around the nation. We focus only on Puerto Rico. Next slide. What do we do day in and day out? We impact decisions mostly just through education, through our member companies. We are able to have a very good finger on the pulse of what is happening in the solar and storage market, from pricing to product availability to issues with interconnection with the utility company to federal funding possibilities. And most of our work, I would say, is just through educating different stakeholders, bringing interest groups together to problem solve and troubleshoot any bottlenecks, to answer the question of why don't we have more solar and storage being deployed? What can we do to accelerate the process? We also inform our own members, which we're entirely self-funded as CESA. We're a nonprofit that is only funded by our own membership dollars. So we inform our own members, but also the public and interest groups like you all today. So it's great to be able to share our perspective on the solar and storage policy landscape here this morning. And ultimately, everything we do, we focus on expanding the market for solar and storage here in Puerto Rico. Next slide. Here are our current member companies. If you are with a company that is in the solar or storage space and you're doing business in Puerto Rico, or you are at the place where you are spending your own staff time and money, maybe doing a feasibility study about entering the market, then I encourage you to talk with us about joining CESA. We're similar to a Chamber of Commerce, actually, but we focus only on solar and storage and only in Puerto Rico. So if you would like to talk with us about membership, then the easiest way is just go to our website, sesapr.org, SESAPR.org. I'll put it in the chat box here. Okay, next slide. Starting off at the highest level here, can tell you that if you can't tell by my accent, I'm not actually from Puerto Rico originally. I am from the state of Missouri, and I came 6 weeks after Hurricane Maria happened in September of 2017. This was something that shook the sort of paradigm down to its foundation, just in lots of ways. But from an energy perspective, this was the worst blackout in the history of the nation and the second worst in the history of the world in terms of lost customer hours of service. Electricity that went away for the longest by far of any sort of natural disaster we've ever seen before in the United States. And it was interesting because it happened at a time when the cost of solar and storage had come down to the place where it's actually a feasible alternative to consider in the response, in the actual disaster response. So it's an exciting time because we're starting to actually see solar and storage be part of the solution for saving lives during blackouts and for preventing loss of life and suffering during future blackouts, and maybe even actually preventing the blackouts themselves. Next slide. This is actually the graphic that caught my attention and made me decide to go ahead and come to Puerto Rico and help. The graphic on the top is a satellite image of Puerto Rico at night right before the hurricane. And then on the bottom is just a few days after the hurricane when power was just starting to come on around the island. Took over a year for many people to get power restored, and it was a long, tedious process, and is still ongoing. 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had a blackout out of nowhere. It's still unexplained, and it lasted for 5 days. So we're still in a very precarious situation with the power grid and the old generation units that are here. Next slide. Now, immediately after the hurricane, what we did see in the realm of solar and storage is nonprofits and foundations rallying to deploy solar and storage small systems, mostly for homes and critical facilities, as quickly as they could. There were stories of airplanes being sponsored and flown in with donated solar panels. I was part of a nonprofit that was part of some solar brigades that installed solar on homes and critical facilities around the island. And today you can go to this website, PuertoRicoSolarMap.org, and see a catalog of all the solar and storage systems that were installed and the nonprofits that were involved in funding them. It was really inspiring to see the collaboration that happened in getting solar and storage deployed in that era, especially since there was not any federal support at that time in the immediate aftermath after the hurricane for solar and storage. So while FEMA was focused on getting infrastructure rebuilt, and the only sort of power focus was on traditional generation. We didn't see any solar and storage from the federal government. So the hope from nonprofits was that we as nonprofits would be able to kind of set the tone for future funding support that would hopefully come from the federal government. Next slide. So what is going on today? This is a list of all of the renewable energy projects that are actually operational today. 227 megawatts of large-scale renewables, mostly solar, one large wind installation, and a couple of small landfill gas installations. These are the ones that are online today. And the strongest advice that I have to new companies looking to do business in Puerto Rico in general is make friends with the companies that have succeeded in the past. It's a very complicated landscape. And the best way I can imagine predicting future success for your company is to have an approach of befriending local companies that have been successful already and partnering with them, as opposed to trying to look at Puerto Rico like the 51st state or another Latin American country or a colony. It's all of those things, and it's a unique paradigm that I really think the best way to solve the puzzle is by paying attention to what has already been successful in the past and trying to imitate that in the future. Next slide. This is a map of where the large-scale solar installations are around the island, mostly located on the southern and northwestern tip of the island. Hopefully we'll see a lot more of these in the coming months and years through some large-scale RFPs that are out there right now. I'll talk about a little bit. Next slide. Next slide shows our wind farms. There's only 2 wind farms that have been constructed on the island. One of them is operational and the other one is still being repaired from damage from Hurricane Maria 4.5 years ago. There is a lot more wind offshore than there is onshore. So there are some studies that the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, the Department of Energy are doing to try and assess the feasibility of offshore wind. The current large-scale RFPs that are happening, any renewables can bid on. So that includes onshore and offshore wind as well. But as of now, there's only been 2 onshore wind projects built. And part of the reason that I'm showing these existing projects is all of the existing wind and solar projects have a small amount of storage on site as well, referred to as MTRs, minimum technical requirements. This is around 15 minutes of power just to soften the impact on the grid for when the sun comes out quickly or goes away quickly, or the wind ramps up or dies down quickly. But we don't have any real large-scale storage installations yet. Hopefully that will change soon. But all of the large-scale solar and wind projects do have some amount of large-scale storage there to help buffer the impact of the intermittency on the grid. Next slide. Right, so Mr. Laboy mentioned some of these overarching policy things that we have going on right now. Law 17 was a very large bipartisan effort that happened in response to Hurricane Maria to set the public policy for energy for Puerto Rico for years to come. There was a lot of debate about what percentage target and requirement should be in there for renewables, and it turned out that 100% was the number that was agreed upon. At the time, Puerto Rico was only the 3rd jurisdiction in the nation to have a 100% required renewable energy law. There's now, I think, 15 different states that have that. But at the time in 2019, we were the 3rd place in the nation to pass that. Noteworthy is our super aggressive first stair step towards that 100%. Puerto Rico is only around 3% renewable energy right now. That number has not changed for a long time. In a global sense, but getting to 40% by 2025 is something that seems inconceivable to lots of people, but it is actually physically possible. And when we're seeing the alignment of federal funds actually starting to flow now, and the regulators actually moving forward with the rules that are in place that need to enforce this, the private grid operator called LUMA that's been in place for almost a year now, which is up and operational. There is actually hope, and there is a physics pathway to get to 40% by 2025, and it very well might be the cheapest thing that we can do for consumers anyway. So it's a really exciting time to be towards the end of 2022 right now and looking at this moonshot of 40% by 2025 on our way to 100% by hopefully a lot sooner than 2050. Now, the first public policy thing that happened after this law passed was the development of the IRP, the utilities 20-year planning horizon. This is only the 2nd time on the island there'd ever been an IRP planning process. It had a lot more participation than the first one did a few years ago. And the biggest numbers in simple math, to get to 40% renewables by 2025, we need to build another 3,750 megawatts of renewables. The determination was made that There's 1,500 megawatts of storage, large-scale storage that needs to be built in order to facilitate those renewables coming online. So the Energy Bureau concluded their IRP at the end of 2020 and said, okay, we are going to have some RFPs that are going to add up to 3,750 megawatts of renewables and 1,500 megawatts of storage, with all the RFPs done by the end of 2023, so that all those projects can come online by the end of 2025. The project has been delayed, but there still is hope that we can get caught up and be back on track and arrive at this 40% by 2025. Next slide. Now, 1 year ago, this is sort of getting in the weeds, unless you're with a company that's doing large-scale solar or storage, or residential or commercial level on an aggregated sense, which is called a virtual power plant. That's when you take thousands or tens of thousands of distributed solar and storage and you aggregate them together to behave as if it is a large-scale power plant. So 1 year ago, this was a landmark moment in Puerto Rico's energy history. February of last year, an RFP was issued that was supposed to, that had the goal of resulting in 1,000 megawatts of renewables, 500 megawatts of storage, and 150 megawatts of virtual power plant bids. Now, as of now, 844 megawatts of large-scale PV plants have been approved by all three of the substantial approving entities, and 220 megawatts of large-scale storage. There are still some interconnection studies pending, and there's still some chance that some of those projects might not go forward, but all of them have achieved their substantial approval from the PREPA staff, the PREPA Board of Directors, the Energy Bureau, which is the energy regulator, and the Fiscal Oversight and Management Board, which needs to approve all major contracts on the island. So this was a very exciting time. That most recent approval happened just last month. So we're very optimistic about those projects going forward, and also hopeful that the two pending virtual power plant projects will get wrapped up as far as what's referred to as tranche one of this multi-billion-dollar RFP that's out there. That once these projects go forward and go into construction phase, then if you're with a company that manufactures batteries or manufactures any component of these projects, then you're probably going to start getting a call from developers. Now, if you're a developer yourself, you're going to be more interested in this next slide, which is hopefully this month, probably next month at the latest, we'll see another multi-billion-dollar RFP issued. The previous one was issued by PREPA. The next one is going to be issued by an independent RFP issuing entity that was contracted directly by the Energy Bureau. This is because the Energy Bureau was extremely frustrated because the first one went too slow in their view. So they took that responsibility out of the hands of PREPA and hired their own consultant basically to oversee the next RFP process. This is an entity that has experience with hundreds or thousands of RFPs like this. It's the only thing they do. So there is a lot more hope that tranche two will stay on schedule and move forward in a more predictable fashion. The draft RFP was published just last month, and actually yesterday was the deadline for public comments on that draft RFP. But if you want to get involved in this, then there's a website called Action Group, ACCION Group. I'll put it in the chat box as well, actually, if you want to go sign up for alerts on that. Or if there's anything that you miss in this presentation that you want to see more info on, just email me at info@cesapr.org, info@cesapr.org, and we can get you connected with the further details. Next slide. One overarching thing that's still happening is that PREPA is the last of the major bankruptcies that has not yet been settled. This was before Hurricane Maria happened in 2017. Essentially, the entire society collapsed financially. There was over $100 billion in bankruptcy that was declared from every public entity on the island. All of that has been settled now, painstaking process that was overseen by the Fiscal Oversight and Management Board, except for PREPA. This is the very last debt puzzle that has not yet been solved, and it has been ordered into formal mediation in federal court. Hopefully it will be wrapped up in the next couple of months, but it could take till the end of this year. It could take till sometime next year. No one knows exactly how long that's going to take, but there is a lot of hope that once PREPA comes out of bankruptcy, they will have a better credit rating and it'll be easier to do business with them. Next slide. So looking back, we've just talked so far today about the large scale solar and storage market. We have lots of good things going for us, including very supportive politics at the local level, at the Puerto Rico level, and at the national level. We have a really strong law. We have a supportive regulator. We have frequent power blackouts still happening, which reminds everyone at least once a month of the need to go ahead and deploy more solar and storage and strengthen the grid that we have. So this results in lots and lots of opportunity for large scale storage and solar and all forms of renewables on the grid, potentially. You never know. I mean, things could change, and we could see things maintain the status quo for a really long time. But we certainly, as CESA, are pushing, and a lot of entities are, to have this transformation of the energy paradigm be real. Okay, next slide. Now let's move to talk about distributed generation. This is solar and storage that's installed on homes and businesses. You'll see a big uptick here. Looking back over the last few years, 2017 is, or the end of 2017 is when you saw Hurricane Maria. Especially over the last couple of years, we've seen the solar and storage industry really start to grow quickly. We've gone from around 10,000 customers when Hurricane Maria happened to over 45,000 today. So remember, we had around 230 megawatts of large scale storage deployed. We have over 350 megawatts of distributed generation already deployed, including 200 megawatts of storage and with over 500 megawatt hours. And this is mostly residential. It's almost entirely residential. There is some commercial and industrial as well. But this is something where if the trend continues, then this could be something that supplies a significant percentage of Puerto Rico's power from distributed, mostly rooftop solar by 2025 and beyond. Next slide. Looking forward at the distributed generation paradigm, the net metering law, this is the law that allows customers to interconnect solar to their grid and get full retail credit for it, whether they use those electrons in their building or put those electrons back onto the grid. There's a really good law in Puerto Rico for that, with systems all the way up to 5 megawatts. So homes all the way up to industry is able to install solar and in a cost competitive way. They also, there is a total exemption from sales taxes for solar and storage equipment here on the island. That's the only financial incentive that really exists. Puerto Ricans do not file federal taxes, federal income taxes directly. So unless solar or storage is owned by a US-based entity, Puerto Ricans cannot directly access the 30% is now 26% federal tax ITC. Law 17, this is the 100% renewable energy law, requires fast interconnection for residential and all systems under 25 kilowatts. There's no permission needed from any entity. Anyone can just call up and say, I want to install solar and storage today. And if the solar company has the labor and equipment available, they can have it installed the next day. And then they inform the utility company that it exists, and the utility has to apply net metering on their bill within 30 days. It's taken a long time, but I expect later this week for LUMA to file their quarterly update on this topic and show that they are in substantial compliance with getting within 30 days residential customers with net metering on their bills. Next slide. For larger systems over 25 kilowatts, the law says there's only a 90-day time frame for utilities to approve those interconnections. The utility is wildly out of compliance with that. It's 3 years later, and it's still taking half a year, up to a year, for those larger systems to get approved to be interconnected. So that's something we are focusing on this year with CESA to try and help address those bottlenecks and encourage the utility to become in compliance with those provisions. For utility scale projects, the same law 17 requires expedited 6-month construction permitting. This is important because without this sort of a focused, expedited process for permitting, it can easily take 2 or 3 years or longer for construction permitting to happen on this island. So we're gearing up to support the implementation of that expedited 6-month construction permitting as well. Next slide. Great. So these are some questions that I was asked ahead of time. What makes Puerto Rico's path to 100% renewable energy unique? Puerto Rico is the oldest colony on the planet. That is a very unique situation. Puerto Ricans essentially do not have decision-making power that's being a property of the United States of America. So the politics between Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. are a lot more important than they are for most states. So if you want to engage in the political paradigm of Puerto Rico, I encourage also engaging in the political paradigm of Washington, D.C. as well, because the relationship is so unique. There's the definite.
I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
you.
I
I think these are very, very good questions, but we will share the slides after the presentation. And just because we're running behind of time a little bit, maybe we can skip over the slide and then just move on to your next one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I'm just looking at how many slides I have after that. This is the last slide, I think, absolutely. These are my recommendations for any companies looking to do business in Puerto Rico. Be tenacious. Don't just kind of try and swoop in and do business quickly here, but have patience and be persistent. Focus on collaboration especially with local Puerto Rican companies and individuals that have been successful in the past. Have compassion for the situation of Puerto Rico being a colony and being in and just getting out of bankruptcy and the politics being very fragile. And if you're in the solar storage industry, then absolutely consider joining CESA, because we'll be happy to help any solar storage business that is looking to deploy more solar and storage on the island. And there's and you can, without even joining, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and learn more about us on our website. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. I'll be with you on the panel that's coming up here next. And yeah, thank you. Good luck if you're entering or growing into the solar and storage market here in Puerto Rico.
Thank you so very much for all that information, PJ. I think that was very, very informative, and I can absolutely recommend following CESA. There's a lot of activity going on in the island, and it's never boring to hear what's up next for the island. So highly recommend that. And now we are moving on to a research representative, Dr. Matthias Vetter from the Fraunhofer Institute for Solar Energy Systems. Dr. Vetter is an electrical engineer with 24 years of experience at Fraunhofer Institute, and he is the current head of Department of Electrical Energy Storage. For those of you who are not familiar, Fraunhofer Institute is a German research institute in all industries, and they are active globally. And we are so happy to have him with us here today. Welcome, Dr. Vetter, and we look very much forward to hearing more about active distribution and isolated mini grids. Thank you so much.
So thanks very much, Leslie. I hope you can hear me. Everything is working?
Yes, everything's working properly. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for this kind introduction and providing me to present here. This for us, it's afternoon here in Germany. So yes, we just heard about the different aspects and installations, large scale, and we're always talking about front of the meter and behind the meter applications. And so I will concentrate more on the small and medium-sized systems. So therefore, choosing the title active distribution grids as well as mini grids. And if you want to introduce large-scale renewables, for sure, battery storage is a key component. So next slide, please. So I will just provide you a short introduction to our research, what we are doing at our institute. Then have just a look on the stationary battery storage market, different market segments. And then, as already mentioned, focusing on the behind the meter, isolated mini grids, as well as active distribution grids. There are much more applications. We just heard it in the presentation before, but focus will in this presentation will be those three applications. And then battery is a quite nice component, but there are coming also things around, and therefore we have to look also on the key factors for storage product, as well as project evaluation and holistic quality assurance measures, which are key. Next slide, please. So with this, just want to show quickly what we are doing. So we have one group working on battery cell technologies, materials, just to mention without going here into detail. Today, it's a lot about lithium-ion batteries, also driven by the requirements of the automotive industry for the transition in our transport sector. One topic is highest energy densities, allowing highest cruising ranges, and so on and so forth. Lithium-ion batteries are also playing, meanwhile, a very important role in the stationary sector, but just to mention, in stationary applications, there are also other battery technologies which are or which might be in the future of interest. So in the stationary sector, it's not all about lithium-ion batteries. So therefore, we are also working on alternatives. Then we have a group working on battery engineering, everything which has to be done to get a safe battery system, a safe, efficient, and reliable battery system, especially the system design, thermal management, battery management, state estimation, lifetime prediction, and operating control strategies are here research topics. Then we have a group called Applied Storage Systems. Here we are really accompanying projects worldwide with different tasks. So first of all, energy management. The battery system is a quite nice component, but the energy management has to take care that the battery system is doing something sensible. So, but besides energy management, also the question of an appropriate system design, technical due diligence, site inspection, testing, monitoring, and so on and so forth. Everything which is necessary to reduce the risk, especially with new technologies, to really have an appropriate system in the field. Quality assurance is here the key. Then, last but not least, we are running also a huge test lab. There we are doing all tests on electrical, thermal, mechanical, abuse, non-abuse testing. The topics are mentioned here. I don't want to go here into detail. Coming to the next slide, all these groups shown here, we are currently really busy in moving to our new facility, everything under one rooftop. The first group has already moved there with the laboratories. The other three will follow. It's a laboratory with 5,500 square meters, battery cell technology, battery engineering, applications, testing, everything under one roof. And very important, you see on this picture, the whole roof is covered with PV. We will get also our own battery systems. So parts of our power demand to run a research and development lab will be covered by PV plus battery. So it's a typical commercial industrial application, C&I application of PV plus battery storage. So next slide, please. Coming now to the services, battery storage especially can provide services to all stakeholder groups. So the idea is not to go here in this table into detail. Just the next animation, please. And also we have a link to this paper which we have published. So battery really can provide services on the consumer, behind the meter level, to the grid level, distribution, transmission grid, and even to the high voltage transmission, and therefore to different stakeholders, to residential groups, to commercial industrial groups, up to the distribution system operators, transmission system operators, and the utilities. I think this publication provides a quite nice overview on what's happening worldwide. So next slide, please. Yes, just to mention once again, here in this presentation, we are looking on the behind the meter, just quickly, information on the German market residential, and looking then also on commercial industrial applications, then isolated mini grids, as well as then the active distribution grids. So next slide, please. So this is the impressive market growth in the German residential market. So it's really single family houses, mainly rooftop covered with PV and the battery system integrated. And there you can see end of last year, 3.5 gigawatt hours. If you please remember this 3.5 gigawatt hours, one part of behind the meter market. So obviously this market is working. I'm just here in Munich on the Intersolar EES conference, and for sure residential was, is, and will be a hot topic in Germany. But to say it clearly, these systems will not cover all our storage requirements for sure, which we have in our energy transition phase, which we are currently faced with. Okay, so next slide. So remember 3.5 gigawatt hours, please. Next slide. So if you're coming then to apartment buildings, in apartment buildings, you can also cover PV on the rooftop. You also can install a battery. And people also want to drive an electric car. So therefore, there are coming a lot of different issues around where in single family houses, it's quite easy. In such buildings, a little bit more complicated. Nonetheless, we also started here a project. It's currently under in the installation phase. If you go to the next slide, please. There you can see also PV, we have storage, and we have also a combined heat and power unit for sure. In winter, we do not generate that much PV electricity, but we have additional heat demand. So CHP is a perfect match. And what we also see here is battery storage. If you go to the animation to highlight the battery storage, just click please. Yes, perfect. So battery storage is here also a key component for local optimization. So if you go then to the next slide, please. If you look now to the commercial and industrial applications, I ask you to remember this 3.5 gigawatt hours of residential battery storage. If you look now, it's also behind the meter commercial industrial applications we installed in Germany, nearly 180 megawatt hours. So obviously there's something wrong with the market design. Otherwise, we would have at least the same installations that we have in the residential sector. So obviously there's a little bit homework. It's not a technical issue. It's not a technology issue. It's about market designs. And this has to be solved in Germany, but also in other countries. So next slide, please. But there's the need to do something. Coming back to our battery laboratory, it was it is an old building where other users have used this building, and now suddenly we are coming in and we have a much higher power and energy demand. So what is an issue, and this is typical, increasing power and energy demand caused by change of the extension of the commercial industrial use case, as we do. You see, we have more than 4 megawatt need. Then there's sector coupling. Also, we are driving more and more electric cars, so we will have 20 charging stations, so additional demand. So an already heavy loaded industrial grid is getting even more heavy loaded by different users like us, but also by the energy, the transition in our transport sector. If you go to the next. So this existing electrical infrastructure is often not sufficient for such new use cases. And we have also to discuss about cost and time intensive effort to extend the transformer capacity. This is not done from today to tomorrow. This is what we learned also when we discussed with the utility. And for sure, we as others have also strategy to be CO2 neutral in around 10 years. And PV plus battery is paying in all these topics to solve the problems and getting then also more environmentally friendly. And this is what we also want to have. We want to run in a laboratory today exactly in this way. So this is the motivations on the one side, but also the pure requirements which we found here when we decided to go into this existing building. So quite a nice example for commercial industrial, and very important. If you look on the possibilities, revenue stacking for such commercial industrial systems is a really huge benefit if the regulatory framework allows us to address these benefits. What can we do? Increase PV self-sufficiency, peak shaving here in Munich, currently also under discussion, backup power, flexible EV charging, also in the discussion, grid services, additional grid services, and so on and so forth. Just highlighted a couple of the possibilities, and for sure then in green market here and energy management, smart energy management has to take care for that everything is working properly together. So next slide, please. So this was commercial industrial. Now looking a little bit on mini grids, so isolated mini grids. Here we have a quite nice project, the project RAACH. There's also on the lower right side a link. There you can find a little bit more information. So we have also in Europe a lot of islands and isolated places where mini grids, PV hybrid mini grids could be a solution. And here are 3 examples, 2 in the southern part of Europe, in Spain and Italy, and 1 in the northern part. For sure, in the southern part, their solar plays a much more important role. On the other side, wind plays a much more important role in the northern part. So next slide, please. So what are the targets? Energy consumption. Everything starts with energy efficiency. Reduction of 10% is the goal in this project. Renewable energy penetration plus 50%. Fossil fuel consumption minus 50%. What we are learning today is it's not only about reduction of the fossil fuel consumption, but also getting independent from fossil fuels. We have to learn this under this horrible circumstances which we are living in since the 24th of February. So even more here, renewables is a key, is one of the solution factors. Then emissions for sure minus 60% and also energy cost reduction. So next slide, please. So what is the approach? We have different technologies. We have generators, electricity generators, we have thermal collectors, we have also heat pumps, we have thermal storage, we have electrical storage, which is the battery. This has to be controlled in an optimized way. The energy management plays an important role. And for sure, for the battery part, as this is a battery presentation, the battery management, state-of-the-art battery management with the topics addressed here in the lower left side is key. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so now coming to active distribution grids. If you want to, this is also kind of a mini grid, but it's that it has a connection to the public grid. If we install a lot of decentralized generators, it could happen that we have cable congestion. So, and what is the solution? If you click on the next slide, the solution is then integration of a battery storage. Just we wait until it works. The solution is also then installation of the battery storage, and then we keep all our equipment, transformers, cables, and so on and so forth under their allowed operating conditions. So if you want to the same like a mini grid approach, but we have additionally the connection, and we can support then also the distribution grid up to the transmission grid. So next slide, please. And this what we did also in a kind of a pilot project. We see here a couple of single and multi-family houses, and instead of home storage systems in each single household, we have a battery storage in a kind of a district storage. We have PV systems on the rooftop. We have a CHP unit, and we have also a heat pump. So a lot of decentralized generators and heat and electricity providers, and we have besides the battery storage then also a huge thermal storage with 20,000 liters. So if you go to the next slide, what we can see here on the left side, the simulation, the fraction of direct usage of solar, which is always the most efficient way, then the amount of solar which is first stored in the battery storage and afterwards used, and we also have a little bit of electricity produced by the CHP unit, which is stored in the battery, and a huge fraction of CHP for sure is then directly used. And if you look on the monitoring results, they differ slightly. There are some reasons. In the first year, there were problems with the air conditioning, too high temperatures in the operating group, so shutdown of the CHP unit and the battery inverter. And then, unfortunately, necessary maintenance interval of the CHP unit in winter. So no solar electricity available to run the heat pump. Or the CHP unit was not able to provide electricity and heat. So we had to run the heat pump, and the heat pump has not enough PV electricity available. So it has to use electricity from the public grid. And for sure, then also end users do not behave 100% as predicted in the simulations. A very important message here, physically, this grid is almost independent from the electricity grid, but the whole energy supply means electricity plus heat is strongly dependent on the natural gas grid. And you are aware about our discussions about natural gas today. So before the 24th of February, we would have said exactly such energy, local energy cells is the right way towards 100% renewables with natural gas as an intermediate solution until we have installed enough renewables. Big question mark after 24th of February, how we handle such decentralized systems, how we design such decentralized systems in the near future. So a topic which has to be discussed, which has to be addressed. Everything changed in the last couple of weeks. So next slide, please. Now coming back to the battery, key factors for battery storage product and project evaluation. Safety, for sure, everything starts with safety component and system level, including also the functional safety, how proper the different components, battery plus power electronics plus EMS are working together, reliability, the same, and then also performance, system efficiency, and system effectiveness. And everything is then also influenced by aging. And therefore, next slide, please. I just want to briefly, without going too much into detail here on the slides, we have aging, meaning capacity fade, and here it's shown 3 different products, cells from different products, and you can see on the x-axis the equivalent full cycles that the capacity fade is different for different products, even so they are the same cell chemistry. There one has to be aware of. Next slide, please. Second, it's very important to consider also the increase of the inner resistance, and there are also 3 market available products, 3 different behaviors, again calculated on the equivalent full cycles. So the increase of the inner resistance to the nominal resistance, so reduced performance, but also increased heat production. This could be not only a performance issue, but also a reliability issue if the cooling system is not designed for such an increased heat production. So next slide, please. With this, we go quicker through because time is running. Calendric aging, we also have to invest besides cyclic aging, also calendric aging. So over time and over full cycling, equivalent full cycles, over cycling a battery, capacity is reduced and inner resistance will increase. This we have to keep in mind when we are designing systems. So we are designing it not only for year 1, but also for year 10 and also at least year 20. And we have to look how the battery is behaving then in our system. So next slide, please. With this background, once again, in the PV self-sufficiency case, aging has an influence on the reduction of the capacity, increase of the inner resistance, meaning reduction of efficiency, at the same time increase of the cooling demand. So 3 effects in parallel why we are reducing the self-sufficiency, less storage capacity available, more electricity has to be exchanged with the grid. This means increase of the electricity bill. This is a typical effect on battery aging on the system performance over years. So next slide, please. And this we investigated again for this nice Weinsberg project. And we looked on this battery, 150 kilowatt hours of capacity installed. And we looked on what happens over the years without degradation, which is a theoretical value, obviously, then with PV degradation and with degradation of the battery system and all degradation effects together. Then you can see over the time a reduction of the self-sufficiency from nearly 70% to a little bit over 60%. So these are typical investigations. And then you could ask when you should replace the battery. And if you go to the next slide, we did exactly these calculations for the boundary conditions of this project. And if you remember the slides on aging, very important, lithium-ion batteries are still can be still operated also if the capacity is lower than 80%. So with lead acid batteries, it was defined end of life 80%. Lithium-ion batteries can be run even further. So the question is not only from a technical point of view, but also then more important from an economical point of view, when is the right time to exchange the battery? And there we are looking on the levelized cost of energy, of the consumed energy in this application. And there you can see the economic best case is if you run the battery still to 60% of the remaining capacity. So too early exchange of the battery from a pure economic point of view wouldn't make sense. It might be changing with different prices, with different boundary conditions, with different applications you consider. So this has to be evaluated project by project. This is also important, but also important, a battery do not has to be replaced too early. Pays also into the environmental footprint, which we have to consider for all the components as well. So if you go to the next slide, and there we can really go fast. This is just for your information. I think the slides will be shared afterwards. Our services in the field of quality assurance during the development phase, execution, operation, and dismantling phase. If you go to the next slide, there you see all the topics where we serve our project partners in field projects. Having not the time here to go into detail, I want just to highlight then with the last slide the main messages. If you go to the next slide, please. First, large-scale integration, no doubt about that. Fluctuating renewables need storage in active distribution grids as well as in mini grids, as well as in our whole grid infrastructure towards 100% renewables, like Puerto Rico has target defined, like we in Germany and other countries have defined this as well. So technically, reliability of the power supply for sure, economically grid connected in applications, innovative business models. For example, in Germany, in post-feed-in tariff times, again, the regulatory framework has to be adapted. In isolated mini grids, it's just the reduction of the fuel cost, and it's getting even more important these days, the reduction of the fuel dependency. We also defined in Germany, meanwhile, renewables as the free energy, then we also have what we see as a result, huge market growth for stationary battery storage expected, for sure not in the same order of magnitude than in the automotive electromobility sector, but also in the stationary sector we can expect a huge market growth. Real world projects with battery storage, especially with the new technologies, there's still no really long-term experience, therefore appropriate quality assurance measures are key for risk mitigation. And with this, I want to thank first for your participation and also for inviting me to this very interesting afternoon. Thanks very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Vetter. I think your presentation perfectly highlighted how valuable these isolated networks would be for Puerto Rico and their long-term energy goals, reducing fuels and just general dependency. And of course, it's a pleasure from hearing this from Germany's, one of Germany's leading researchers in this field. And we are staying on topic because we're now moving on to our company presentations. We will hear from Dr. Vetter again shortly in the panel discussion. Now we're moving on to our company presentations, and our first company that we are so proud to have on our delegation is TESVOLT, and they are presenting on energy storage systems for renewable energies. Today they are represented by Valeska Gotke, who is responsible for public affairs at TESVOLT. Thank you so much, Valeska.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and I'm very glad to be part of this Puerto Rican German conference. Wonderful. So we have already heard from Dr. Matthias Vetter how battery storage systems are used in many different ways to solve the big challenge of today. And the big challenge of today is that we need to transform our energy supply systems into carbon-free systems while maintaining our living standards. And two keys to solve these challenges are to increase the use of renewables and to drive down energy consumptions. TESVOLT's high battery storage systems are enablers exactly for those goals. TESVOLT is the German market leader for commercial lithium-ion-based battery storage systems for on-grid and off-grid applications. And with TESVOLT systems, commercial and industrial customers can better apply renewable energy and use energy more efficiently. So this way they can improve their energy consumption, improve their CO2 footprint, and reduce their energy costs significantly. As you know, energy prices are a particularly pressing issue for Puerto Rico, as you already pay more than twice as much as people do on the US mainland. And the commerce and industry sector suffers especially from increasing electricity prices, as this sector consumes more than 60% of Puerto Rico's energy and is also largely responsible for the CO2 pollution. And TESVOLT addresses this crucial sector with high quality solutions, high quality solutions that stand out with competitively high efficiency rates and low standby losses, like for example, 100% depth of discharge and a battery efficiency of more than 98%. TESVOLT's batteries fulfill maximum safety standards. TESVOLT's battery optimizer monitor at cell level. This prevents a fire hazard even in the event of such a damage. And also TESVOLT systems stand out with competitively high life cycles, up to 8,000, whereby conventional competition has about 4,000 life cycles. And this translates into a long life expectancy, just to name a few of the benefits. And we can move on to the next slide, please, where I come to the case study. TESVOLT has realized more than 3,000 projects worldwide. And I picked this project we realized for a dairy farmer in Germany for you. We installed 38.4 kilowatt and 38.4 kilowatt hours and 18 kilowatt battery for this dairy farmer so that he can use the battery for two of the most popular applications, which are to increase self-consumption and peak load shaving. This farm uses a 41 kilowatt peak solar plant, and in the right-hand corner below, you see typical load profile of a dairy farmer. You see in yellow the load of the self-generated electricity of solar power, and you see in green the self-consumed solar power throughout the day. And then you also see in red the electricity, the more expensive electricity that is drawn from the grid in the early morning hours and in the evening hours, including the peaks this dairy farmer experiences in the early morning hours and the evening hours. He faces a very common problem of a typical dairy farmer who does not rely on milking robots. That is, the busiest times are exactly the times when the sun doesn't shine. So the solution is quite logical, that if you use a storage system, you can use the excess electricity that is produced in the course of the day during those busiest hours, like in the evening times, and therefore reduce electricity prices significantly. The second application, demand charges, the demand charge management can be optimized with battery storage system by shaving down the peaks and therefore driving down the demand charges and reduce the energy bill significantly. Needless to say, in combination of these two applications, the electricity prices, the energy bill of this dairy farmer is driven down even more significantly. These are just like a few examples of applications that can be used with TESVOLT's battery storage systems. There are many more, and I'm very much looking forward to learning from you which applications can best serve the interests of commercial customers in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valeska, for presenting on your innovative C&I solutions. And now we will move on to our next delegate, which is INTEC Engineering. And we will hear from Mr. Christian Daniel, Sales Director at INTEC, on their biomass fueled energy system. Thank you so much.
Hello, good morning to all of you. Thank you very much, Leslie, for the introduction and the opportunity to be a participant in today's meeting and conference. At first, I would like to introduce you shortly to INTEC. Our company is providing a broad range of solutions and equipment for high temperature heat supply for manufacturing processes in many industrial branches. Beyond this, we also have solutions and supply different applications in regard to renewable power generation. This can be, as an example, a biomass-fired power or a cogeneration plant. This can be heat recovery solutions with own ORC, organic Rankine cycle turbines. We also have an offer for geothermal power plants as well as innovative solutions, how to hybridize a solar power plant based on a concentrated solar power concept with biomass. Especially looking at today's topic about Puerto Rico and renewable energy generation, we think that it's a good opportunity to present our island solutions for waste to energy plants with a capacity from 1 to 20 megawatt electrical. This has been done for also other islands, for example, Maldives. And just to be in the short time frame, we give you also an introduction to a short case study for a typical 1,000 ton per day municipal solid waste incineration system with power generation coming up to 20 megawatt electrical. Okay, perfect. The slide is there. The next one. So typically in this project includes the components starting with the truck scale, with some metal sorting, the waste feeding system, covering the complete boiler unit, the combustion system, flue gas cleaning to highest environmental standards, the turbine and generator system to connect to the grid. And of course, all the local works, civil works, technical building facilities, and all this comes up with from the start of the project until the commissioning, for example, to a price of 137 million euro. And now we look on the income side. The next slide, please. So interestingly, here on the income side, we have typical factors like the gate fee. In this case, it's assumed to be a gate fee of 50 euro, which is approximately could be fitting in a good environmental and developed society. And at the same time here, we have calculated with 12 cents per kilowatt hour for the feed-in tariff. As we have heard from other sources, in Puerto Rico, the cost may be considerably higher for this. Nevertheless, this generates the income from such a plant. And of course, from this income, we have to deduct the cost for the operation. Not yet calculated here are also further opportunities to look into the savings from CO2 reduction, and eventually you can trade also the carbon bonds to generate more electricity. But at the end, let's say such a project can be nicely feasible with a return of investment of 4 to 5 years. And of course, operation time can be up to 20 or 25 years. So in that regard, it should be a good opportunity to do also something good for the environment by reducing the amount and the mass of a landfill. Also, the landfill waste can be reduced, and at the same time to avoid producing additional pollution of the environment, even to reduce and to use the plastics and so on to prevent them going to the oceans and so on. I think that there are good opportunities for this, especially for the island to be self-sustainable in this regard. And we would be looking forward to have the opportunity to develop here on Puerto Rico new projects. This can be either directly done with the power producers, but of course we are interested to cooperate with local partners which are interested to develop such projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian, Daniel. Before we move on, I would like to quickly, of course, make the announcement that we have all of our companies' information, including their contact information and profiles, in our conference brochure, which we will upload to our website and will be available for you after the event. So please be on the lookout for that. But also, if you want to get in touch with any of our companies, also feel free, again, to contact us at info@gaccsouth.com. We are more than happy to make an introduction, take any requests for speakers, any inquiries for our speakers. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next delegate, which is Benjamin Ruiz from RAACH Solar Photovoltaics, and he is the area sales manager for the company. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Well, my name is Benjamin Ruiz. I am the area sales manager for Latin America at the company RAACH Solar. Our company designs, procures, delivers, installs and maintain turnkey and tailor-made photovoltaic systems around the world. We offer 100% CO2 neutral photovoltaic power systems that provide an interactable and stable power supply to the household's appliances. We also offer, obviously, photovoltaic power plants to the commercial and the industrial sector. For that purpose, obviously, we need batteries that should be very reliable in order to keep running some equipments inside the industry or the commercial business. Our company has more than 30 years experiences in photovoltaic, which means that we not only supply the products, but also the necessary engineering, energy consulting, and feasibility studies. Our company offers not the cheapest components, but the lowest lifetime cost of our engineered solutions. We are an authorized distributor and service partners of top-class manufacturers, and we keep major components on stock for immediate deliveries. And our company is also ISO 9001:2015 certified. Next page, please. Okay. This is an example of a solar system. We prepared this installation with some local partners. We worked together this turnkey solution for a tailor-made photovoltaic system. The company GACC selected the consortium in an international tender process. The design of this 1.2 megawatt peak roof-mounted photovoltaic power plant is made for own consumption and zero fit-in. The system was installed in 4 office towers of the new GACC headquarters in Saudi Arabia. We convinced the consumer not with the lowest investment cost, but with the lowest life cost by using the high-class components with a long service life. The 20 tilt angle photovoltaic array is installed on a steel structure at 4.5 meters on the top of the terraza roof. In this system, we used solar wall modules, SMA inverters, and SLETA structure. The company GACC is doing the maintenance and doing also the monitoring of the systems. This is just one example of the system that we can provide or the solution that we can provide. We can also provide system for water pumping, hybrid system, and mini grid system. Thanks for your attention, and I hope that we can get some partners in the local market in Puerto Rico.
Thank you so very much.
Hello, buenos
yes.
días. ¿Me escucha? Hello.
Sorry for the brief interruption there. Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. Now we will move on to 2G. That's one of our delegates that is already active in Puerto Rico, and they are today presenting on decentralized energy generation, or CHP, and they're represented by Mr. Doug Davis today. Thank you so much for joining us, Doug.
Guten Tag, Leslie. Buenos dias. Great to be with all these delegates, and by all means, to echo PJ's earlier comments, it's really something together that we can do to really create a strong, resilient microgrid for Puerto Rico, which is clearly the path we're trying to take as we rebuild what's been long overdue for investment. A little bit about 2G Energy. If you've never heard of us, we're a 25-year-old publicly traded company based in HeGo, Germany. We came to North America, the West, about a little over a decade ago to start doing combined heat power projects in the mainland, when all of a sudden the economics were good for doing on-site power generation using cleaner fuels. If you're not familiar with combined heat power, I always try to simplify it for people. It's nothing more than an energy efficiency project if well designed. And it plays very nicely with renewables and other methods for renewable on-site power generation. It can often serve as a resilient backup to PV or battery, or sometimes displace or maybe allow an owner to optimize those assets to really get through a 24-hour period. In Puerto Rico, we basically are mostly doing work in the pharmaceutical industry, where again, these large companies have very sizable, I'd say, thermal heating or cooling opportunities. Again, a combined heat power plant, as opposed to just an emergency backup generator, is really defined by its efficient use of the waste heat. And again, in the pharmaceutical sector, there's a lot of need for steam or chill water year round. Our temperate climate in Puerto Rico really lends itself to often cooling. So if you get outside of the pharmaceutical manufacturing areas, everybody needs free air conditioning if you're able to deliver it. And again, when I look at the renewable aspect, we look at a PV project in conjunction with combined heat power as really a source of free fuel, which often allows us to run our equipment less aggressively and save on energy and lower the customer's carbon footprint with these renewable technologies. I'd say there's really three things that are pushing our industry forward in not just Puerto Rico, but in the world, which is the drive towards lower emissions. I think the conversation today is much more long-term, not necessarily just focused on, can this pay for itself in 2 or 3 years, but rather, what is my impact to the planet that I'm living on? And I think, combined heat power, renewable power, we're fuel agnostic. We look forward to the opportunities that hydrogen is going to pose as an energy storage system, much like a battery. And in general, Puerto Rico, I think, is posed to really be a leader, believe it or not, in microgrids, mostly due to our kind of unique situation. I always remind people that aren't familiar with Puerto Rico, because of this aging infrastructure, everybody already has a microgrid in Puerto Rico. If you go to a bodega, a gas station, conventional office buildings, everyone has 100% backup emergency power, because they've had to make those investments because the grid's been so unreliable for at least a decade. So while Maria was a catastrophic event, it really was a wake-up call for what we really needed to start doing probably over a decade ago, which is to figure out our path forward. Lastly, I think one of the areas that we spend a lot of time here locally, as well as collaborating with firms from all over the world, is providing education and training to the local marketplace. We're really thrilled to be part of some local organizations. The MCA, to be specific, is certainly a leader on the island with educating and training our workforces. So we have the next generation of doers to put in these PV systems and combined heat power systems. One of the great things that started on Monday was a discussion within the Chamber of Commerce itself about a really exciting renewable natural gas project here in Puerto Rico. And if there's a couple things that I learned from Omar's presentation, is Puerto Rico is not a huge place, and size really does matter as far as our potential. So think smaller sometimes. There's a lot of small opportunities for microgrids. It doesn't have to be a 5-10 megawatt project. It can be, a couple hundred kW. This is a great example of, I think, the next thing for Puerto Rico. We import over 75% of our food in this island, which is really, something we have a huge potential to improve upon, given the fact we can grow things here year round. So as we look more inward to doing our own development of agriculture, and we certainly have a lot of cows here in Puerto Rico, I really look forward to collaborating with some of the other delegates or really anybody about deploying systems like this, because, while we think about livestock, or actually Omar brought up yesterday our wastewater treatment plants here, it's the uncontrolled release of fossil fuels and methane specifically, which can really put a huge impact and positive spin on our carbon footprint. And this is just a simple project up in Canada, which kind of is really where 2G spends and has spent a lot of their energy and efforts over the years, which isn't just a conventional combined heat power plant, but also what can we do to harness these gases that we're creating as a modern society.
Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate your input, and also kind of that you circled back to kind of what we were discussing earlier and or yesterday, and current projects that are going on the island. And we will hear more about that now, because now we're starting our panel discussion moderated by PJ Wilson, whom we heard from earlier. So with that, I would like to ask all of our participating panelists, so TESVOLT, INTEC Engineering, and 2G, please turn on their cameras and unmute themselves, and then I'll give the stage to PJ to ask the questions to our panelists. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And I am told that we're running short on time, so we're going to aim for this to be 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes. My first question is for panelist Dr. Vetter. I'd like to ask, based on your experience, have you seen situations where the development of a microgrid would be limited in a certain location? Or is, in your experience, is every sort of power consumer able to have a microgrid and be entirely off-grid if they want to, and it's just a matter of price?
Well, I would say first, it's a question of the necessity to be really off-grid. As long as there's a distribution grid, I would say definitely one should benefit from the advantages of a distribution grid. For sure, in cases of problems, whatever natural disasters and so on and so forth, I understand then being off-grid, operated by a local mini-grid, secures the power supply. And for sure, I mean, here we see in the projects we have been involved in, there are limitations in terms of the power capability. So energy management and power management is then really even more a key issue. But in principle, with today's technologies, with today's power electronics, we can handle this. This is then the stability question is then first also a question of the power electronics of the battery inverter, but also of the power electronics of the PV system, and maybe also of a very sophisticated controls of the additional gensets and so on and so forth. In principle, you can cover all the power, but for sure, we are limited to the resources which are available in the local mini grid. And we have seen projects we failed when the system design was not accordingly to the needs. But again, with today's components, especially with the power electronics, we can handle this.
Great, thank you for that, Dr. Vetter. I know one interesting article I read here last September in Puerto Rico when we had an unexplained power outage was there was an article that explained the cost on consumers of being without power, the malls around the island and industrial customers. And they listed a long list of customers that were impacted, but the one that gave a financial number was Walmart. I think they said it was $230,000 in damage during that couple of weeks. And that was enough for them to go ahead and start a feasibility study for taking every one of their stores off grid. I haven't heard what the result of their study is, but I think every time that there's a power outage in Puerto Rico, every business starts a feasibility study on, okay, what could it take for me to be off grid on my own microgrid here, whether it's one that's based in solar and storage or in other technologies. So,
but just to mention, if there's a distribution grid, decentralized microgrids which can go off grid, if there are grid problems, understandable, but on the other side, decentralized microgrids, grid connected, can also support the stability in the whole grid. So there, I would say there's really a question: what are the targets? What are the local targets, and what are the regional and national targets?
Sure, and you know what? That's going to be a hot topic in the next IRP planning process for the power company, the next 20-year planning process, which is starting now. It'll be about this time next year when companies will be able to give input, but over the course of the next few months, LUMA and PREPA will be working together with a consultant that they hire to develop the next proposed 20-year business plan for the utility. And I know during the last one, which we participated in, and a couple of our member companies did too, CESA, there was a proposal. Siemens did that IRP, and there was a proposal to break the island into 6 different mini grids that all could function independently. So if if one half of the island gets knocked out, the other half would still function. But that was deemed too expensive at that time. So there was a pilot for the San Juan region to design to do a design for what a mini grid would look like around San Juan. And I don't think that study has been done, but I'm sure that that topic is going to come up again in the next IRP planning process. And the one question will be, okay, should you break it into 6 different mini grids, or should it be 25 different smaller grids, or what would be the most resilient and most best use of resources to break this one power grid, which fails simultaneously when something goes wrong, into a more resilient series of grids of some sort. Next question, and we're going to go through with one question with each speaker, and then we'll go back for a second one if we have time. Next question is for Valeska. With TESVOLT. Valeska, I'm interested in Puerto Rico, where you would see the main applications of your product. How, if you're seeing some immediate low-hanging fruit, or some other, what might you move forward with in the near future if the conditions align in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I mentioned it in my presentation. Commercial customers have the biggest appetite for energy, and more than half of the energy consumed in Puerto Rico is consumed by commercial customers. They are also largely responsible for CO2 pollution. So this is our target group. We offer solutions to commercial customers so that they can reduce their energy consumption and be more cost efficient and reduce their CO2 footprint. And every customer's project, be it a hotel, a farm, a car parking lot, is special. So we make tailor-made applications for them. So yet as unique as they are, they also all have similar challenges, which are they want to be able to use the energy more cost efficiently, and they want to have green renewable electricity. They want to use the cost efficient green electricity instead of expensive damaging diesel fuels. They want to avoid peaks of demand, and they want to have backup power in case of power outages. And this is where I see a lot of demand for TESVOLT's applications, but I'm here to learn from you, and I'm looking forward to find out more about what commercial customers in Puerto Rico really specifically need and plan.
Great, thank you. I love learning about what you have to offer here. Thank you for that. My next question is for Christian with INTEC. So we've talked a lot about solar and wind, and I know you talked earlier in your presentation, but could you talk a little bit more about in Puerto Rico in particular, solutions that you might see for your biomass product? I know I heard a lot right after Hurricane Maria about all the trees that were down, that if we had the infrastructure built and could turn those trees into electricity, that could help, especially as the power grid and lots of the generation units were down. But I've not heard a lot in the recent past. I don't think it had a big role in the last IRP, but again, the next utility planning process is coming up, and would love to hear a little bit more about how in Puerto Rico in particular, you'd see your product working best.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Vijay. I think, let's say, all these opportunities are there to use biomass as a very fast growing fuel in many areas in the tropics and so on, where you have good opportunities with trees and plants growing very fast. There's always an opportunity and even a combination with solar and wind. Yeah, solar and wind has a certain limitation to be available during daytime or something when the wind is blowing, and there's always also good opportunity to hybridize with biomass or to combine all the things. As a biomass is, of course, a renewable fuel, which is always available in a way. And even if this is going into many different areas, it can be a standard biomass, like, let's say you mentioned trees, and even refuse wood from municipalities. The wood can be also reused to have a renewable solution there. So there are many opportunities to use this biomass, but even going the next steps to say whatever is necessary as a solid fuel, if it's even waste, municipal waste, to replace fossil fuel consumption. If you have a power generation with gas or coal or fuel oil, there are many opportunities to use here different, let's say, renewable fuels which are available.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I would love to go to a ribbon cutting for a biomass project here. I'm sure that there's some good applications on the island.
Mm-hmm.
And
sounds interesting. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Next question for Benjamin. I wasn't listening close enough when you do your presentation, so I don't know how to pronounce the name of your company. Is it RAACH Solar?
Benjamin, you're still muted.
I used to say RAACH Solar.
Okay, Benjamin, gracias for telling us about RAACH Solar. We have been talking a little bit actually just during this panel about mini grids and microgrids. I know your company has some experience in mini grid solutions in particular. In Puerto Rico, I can tell you what I've seen so far from the planning process is that proposal by Siemens to develop the grid into 6 different microgrids. And I've also seen some politicians talking about encouraging towns to just make their own microgrid. I know that was part of the law, the energy policy law that passed a few years ago, which makes it legal for a town, say Arecibo or Ponce, could just say, you know what, we're going to be our own grid here. Or neighborhoods also have the legal right to do that now in Puerto Rico. That hasn't been used very much though, just by a couple of mountain town communities. But from your perspective, I'd love to see when you look at Puerto Rico and imagine the ideal mini grid solution, you know, what do you think you conclude, or what sort of factors would you need to know in order to get to that ideal solution for Puerto Rico?
Well, I will say that the technical and the financial key factors of a new location must be assessed by a feasibility study before implementing a mini grid solution. There are many technical aspects that we have to consider. For instance, how big is the village? I mean, how many consumers clients we will have in the mini grid using the energy, which type of loads they are having, the distances between the different energy consumption points, and also the distance between those points and the power plant, and also the administration of this mini grid is a key factor. That's why we used to offer this type of consultancy service in order to make reliable this type of project.
Thank you. I hope to see you or your company involved in the future planning of Puerto Rico as some of these mini grids. I've seen some of them transpire on an industrial scale, and of course we have 45,000 little mini grids of houses already around the island that can automatically be powered when the power does go out. We don't have any of those yet that are networked all together to work as a virtual power plant, but hopefully we'll see some of that happen in the near future too. Okay, Doug Davis, Regional Sales Manager for 2G. Here's my question for you. What is up with this whole concept of renewable natural gas? I mean, just natural gas itself sounds like a pretty clean, green thing. What happens when you put the word renewable in front of it? And what are you seeing for Puerto Rico's future of renewable natural gas? What should we expect to happen?
Great question. And also wanted to give you a shout out. CESA was really instrumental this past year in defeating a solar tax that's going to benefit all Puerto Ricans from, today moving forward, that we don't have to actually pay a tariff on what is free energy from the sun.
Thank you.
I really think that the renewable, natural gas, it's certainly a marketing word, but it is renewable. And I think in Puerto Rico's case, it's because we make it here on the island and we're making it through our own waste of living in an industrial modern world. So to me, it's really critical that we look towards more landfill projects. Our wastewater treatment plants are completely a huge opportunity to play catch up to what we would normally see happening at a wastewater treatment plant in the mainland. All of these are just simple projects that, currently, if we're lucky, we're lighting the methane on fire. In many cases, we're just releasing it to the atmosphere, which is where the real danger comes. So while these are still a fossil fuel, it is renewable because it's a byproduct of our modern lives. And Again, agriculture is another great opportunity. The more we can look within the island to do our own economy, to develop our own jobs, develop our own trading partners, it beats the heck out of shipping everything in from some other continent.
Okay, well, we have a few minutes left here. If we have until 10 after the hour, that leaves us with 3 minutes. So I'd like to throw one important question out there for sure, and then kind of open it up to the panelists want to ask each other any questions as we head into our 1 second coffee break they're going to have here next. If you could imagine, I'm particularly interested in those of you that are actually from Germany, like what do you think is the most important rock song that we should have in mind while we're developing the energy paradigm? I gotta admit, I'm not that well versed, but I know the Scorpions, I know the song Rock You Like a Hurricane. Is that what should we be thinking, or is there any better soundtrack we should keep in mind as we reform Puerto Rico's energy paradigm? Trick question.
Well, this is a little bit, let's say, astonishing already, but to rock you, it's not far away from our rockets, which we offer for some customers. But yeah, I think, let's say, Germany has used the past decades to develop these green energies in a way, starting with the solar energy development for small scale with the photovoltaic in the, on the housing area, with the windmills. So a long time ago, everyone was laughing at these ideas. And I think looking at a retrospective to this was a very successful way to try and test, let's say, these new ventures. And this has been giving us the opportunity to be now a worldwide leader in this ecological and renewable energies. So we hope that we can continue this path now, also going to new applications like hydrogen, green hydrogen, and so on. Many more opportunities are also coming up. And yeah, we're confident to and are happy to share, of course, our development and technology also with other areas in the world. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Let me open it up for 30-second closing comment from each of our panelists. If you have a suggestion for a rock song, a German rock song for us to keep in mind, let us know. Otherwise, just any last words to share. 30 seconds, Dr. Vetter, go.
Flexibility options. In Germany, we started to implement with fluctuating renewables, PV and solar, and we did this now in the large scale. And we have forgotten in the last years to address the flexibility options. Addressing flexibility options, battery storage is one of them, but not the only one. This is key for the energy transition. I don't have a rock song in mind which address flexibility, but maybe we can investigate.
Please put it in the chat box anytime the rest of the day. If anyone thinks of inspirational music we should keep in the background. Next, Valeska with TESVOLT. Any rock music you want us to keep in mind, and closing words to leave with the audience today?
Well, so many rock songs were written about freedom, you know, and like walking on new paths. So I think that is like a very good connection. Like renewable energy is about the path to freedom, as we're realizing quite drastically in Europe right now. And just like Dr. Matthias Vetter said before, what we really need to focus on is like flexibility options to realize that 100% renewable goal, right? And energy storage systems are a key component as a flexibility option to reach those goals. These are my 30 seconds.
Great, thank you, Valeska. Next up, Benjamin, rock music to recommend for us to keep in mind, and closing words on RAACH Solar.
Okay, I will say that institution and clients should not work with the lowest investment cost, but with the lowest life cost over a period of 20 years. Otherwise, they have to buy every time and again components. Using very reliable and very qualitative products, I think, is the best solution for this type of technology.
Great, thank you, Benjamin. And last but not least, Doug Davis with 2G. Leave us with some musical inspiration and parting thoughts on how we should view 2G in the future of Puerto Rico.
We're part of the team, all of the above on all these technologies. And my favorite album, if you're not familiar with it, is Little Feat, Waiting for Columbus, and Time Loves a Hero. So check it out. It's a Puerto Rican tribute album.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. With that, we'll hand it back over to Leslie, just as I play a few clips of my favorite German rock song. You can hear that or not, but rock on. Thanks for the opportunity to moderate this panel.
Gracias.
Thank you so much to everyone on this panel. Thank you to our panelists and of course our moderator, PJ Wilson, very generous of you to donate your time, so to speak, to our conference. And I think a very fitting song track, or at least by the title, would be sticking with the Scorpions, Wind of Change. How about that? Winds of Change, I think that's a good title. You know, that should be our anthem for, you know, bringing change to Puerto Rico. Of course, only the good type of wind. With that, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Robin Burton from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. She is a research analyst in the Strategic Energy Analysis Center at NREL, and she is also the co-principal researcher of a new study in Puerto Rico, PR100, that models Puerto Rico's energy future. And we are excited to hear more details about this and just generally the work of NREL. Again, we are so happy to have you on this conference. We think this is important work that you're doing on the energy future, so to say, for Puerto Rico. So thank you again for joining us, Robin. I would like to introduce our next speaker and actually our panel moderator for today, Mr. Markus Rosenthal. He will present on energy policy, and he is presenting from the German CESA counterpart, so to say, BVES, so that's the German Storage Association. Mr. Rosenthal is the head of policy and regulation there, and he is responsible for battery and hydrogen regulation, investment and financing, and the areas of real estate and mobility. So he has a very broad portfolio of experience, of course, focusing on EU policy, and he will share a little bit on that with us today. We're very happy to have them. So a warm welcome to you, Mr. Rosenthal, and then I would like to hand over the word to you.
Essie, thank you very much for welcoming me. So I'm going to rush through the slides as I have a lot of slides, but don't worry, I will make, I think, some clear points. Before I start, I just give you kind of brief outlook what you're going to expect. I'm going to talk a bit about technology development. I'm going to talk about financing. I'm also going to talk about regulations in Germany and in the EU. Of course, everybody who's in Puerto Rico will ask why is he talking about this? One reason is, of course, I'm living here. A second reason is what we realize because we are participating at conferences in various parts of the world. There are lots of regulatory challenges, which sometimes makes it very smooth to deploy energy storage, and sometimes very challenging. And I think it's kind of always interesting to understand slightly better how it is done in some areas. So I've been told I have about 20 minutes. I'm trying to keep that time, and I would like to see the next slide. Okay, so just that's briefly about us. So we are active, especially in Germany and at the EU level, but we of course have a global outlook. Valeska Gotke, who's also participating, she was managing all our international work before she left to one of our companies. You can tell it's kind of it's always very important to be connected on the global scale. One simple reason is also we have lots of companies which are non-German but are active in the German market, and we have lots of German companies which are active on the global market. The next slide. So there's a few of our members. Wonderful. Next slide. So briefly about one of the important issues we're talking about is decarbonization. That's on the global scale, the Paris Agreement made clear, most governments are very keen to achieve fast results. The EU has a clear target that in 2045, we want to have climate neutrality. As you can see from the lines, that is a huge challenge. Next slide. There's an ongoing debate about what is the future and what is better. Is it electrification or is it green fuels and green hydrogen? I'm responsible here, for instance, for the standardization for lithium-ion batteries. So kind of very special area. And when you do standardization, it's all very technical and you need to be obsessed by it. But I'm at the same token responsible for hydrogen. And for me, it is kind of, at the end of the day, a very simple solution. Who is going to win? That will be decided at the end of the day by the markets. There are going to be lots of applications where we're going to see electricity. Just think about cars, especially in kind of so-called first world countries. We just are building up the electric infrastructure. I've just been recently to South Africa. Very unlikely that in the next 5 years we're going to see a huge electrification wave, but there's a lot of things going on for green fuels and replacing petrol with green fuels. So at the end of the day, we are strongly convinced the market will decide, and those who are going to buy whatever they think is the best, that's going to be decisive. But what's interesting, and you can see between direct electrification and green fuels, there's an area which is yellow and violet purple. That is the field where the competition is happening. Definitely for lorries, definitely for trains. We see lots of innovative things for electric trains as well as for hydrogen trains. So that's going to be a big competition there. Okay, next slide. So what is energy storage? There is kind of, I always like this kind of, there's this McKinsey definition: energy storage absorbs and then releases power so it can be generated in one time and used at another. That's very simple, straightforward. Next slide. This has been written by European Union officials. At the end of the day, we don't have to read the whole text. The message is the same. The reason why I mention this is because the German energy law has kind of a very funny definition of energy storage. Energy storage in Germany is generating energy according to the law, and is the last use of energy. And everybody who is an engineer will be a bit irritated, but I can assure you, this definition, this legal definition, ensures that the government is getting money out of energy storage. And that's kind of marvelous for the government, not so good for the engineers, and not so good for those who want to sell energy storage products. Next slide. We see energy storage is disruptive. I just want to focus on one number. This is 5%. That's kind of the average decline for battery prices. We see about 2 to 3% for electrolyzers. We have one company, a medium-sized company, GPREC, just has been set up 12 years ago. They really start from scratch on. They're now kind of medium-sized company, but relatively big in hydrogen. And the CEO just recently told me most of the products we've done or projects we've done 5 years ago, we could do them now for half the price, just simply because we gained all the experience. Next slide. So these are a few numbers for Germany, they from last year, but kind of you see there's lots of demand for energy. Next slide. And I just used one example from different country from Namibia project by ENERTRAG. ENERTRAG is a German company, especially focused in wind energy. And what they want to do is they want to build in Namibia. They kind of have a government contract or kind of a letter of intent by the government. They want to build in 2026 2 gigawatt hydrogen capacity with wind. 2030 already 5 gigawatts, and then want to turn lots of it into ammonia, which is the simplest way to transport it. If you want to transport hydrogen, that is kind of very difficult, and there are only 2 ships in the world which can transport pure hydrogen. So a bit difficult to create a world market with only 2 ships. Just getting a sign that my internet connection is a bit weak. I just stick another stick. That should be better.
It is a little bit slightly delayed, but we can still hear everything that you're saying.
Okay, I just changed the plug now after 2.5 years of training. You try to keep it simple with the plugs. Hopefully you're getting right. The reason why I just mentioned this project tells you that on the global scale, we're going to see lots of hydrogen projects. And what's also interesting about it, we are in discussions with Malta, also an island like Puerto Rico, the smallest state we have within the European Union. And they also thinking about kind of a really intelligent mix of solar power for cars, for home heating, and hydrogen capacity made out of solar, because they have little wind for industry. They have a big Lego company at Malta, and they want to get it kind of decarbonize the whole process. Okay, next slide. On hydrogen, very briefly, at the moment we have a blue and gray hydrogen, which kind of made out of gas. They do have a very competitive price structure compared to green hydrogen, but due to the Russian invasion in Ukraine and all the implications for the gas market, we are now seeing some days where green hydrogen is cheaper. However, the volume of green hydrogen is very small, but at least I can say all green hydrogen which is produced in Germany is done by our members, and that's a good thing. Next slide. So I briefly want to talk about kind of how things have developed, and I think that's always interesting for every new world you are, just to understand how the processes were done. So in the early 90s, we have the basic technologies, renewable energy, very kind of low efficient solar panels, a few wind turbines, also small, tiny. And then kind of all this moved on now to everything got bigger. The solar panels are much more efficient. The wind turbines are much bigger now and generate more energy. And suddenly we have, for instance, at lunchtime, in the good old days, when you had a coal power station, at lunchtime was a brilliant time to earn money because there was lots of demand for cooking. And now usually even in kind of winter, you have a solar peak, and that's kind of, you can't earn the money anymore with the coal factory, coal generation, power generation. And that means kind of you have to think about flexibilization. You have to make sure that the energy is available at the right time of the day. I will come back later to that and kind of a nice picture. What we're also going to see is kind of technology is moving forward, and regulation, that's kind of a very big issue. The regulation is, it's interesting, it's kind of, I always say, there's lots of regulation which come from different energy times and suddenly are hindering our markets to develop. Okay, next slide. One thing about Germany, we have lots of windmills. That is the red, but we just made it more clearer with the wind farms. They are basically in the north. We have lots of solar power in the south, but solar power does not generate enough energy for all the industry, which is based in the south. And that's that's the structure how Germany is run, more or less, kind of industry in the south, energy production in the north. And we sometimes even have to stop the windmills or the wind generation because there's too much wind and we don't know where the energy should be going. And Berlin, for instance, is kind of on the right-hand side. You know, kind of at least we're using lots of renewable energy, but we are surrounded by countryside, so there's not much, no big user anymore, and that makes it difficult. Okay, next slide. So this was the old energy system. That's, I think, basically across the world, you know, lovely power stations, gas, coal, nuclear, and energy was generated and then went through the whole grid and was brought to the home or to the factories. Next slide. And this is a new world. And I think all the presentations we already have seen, you know, indicate exactly that kind of, you know, energy is produced, energy is going from A to B, that's kind of all horizontal. And that's the decentralized system of energy generation, which is now the new shape of energy. Next slide. You need energy when it is available, and that's the issue with volatile renewable energy. If there's wind, if there's solar, you may want to charge your car during lunchtime, but if you are not at home, that's going to be difficult. Next slide. Just to make the point, Thomas Edison invented the electricity grid in 1880, but of course he has forgotten to invent energy storage, and therefore it is very important that we who are sitting at this conference now are doing everything we can to catch up. Next slide. This is just to confirm the view. It's kind of slightly older slides from McKinsey, but kind of as you can see, all the prices are going down. The average is about 5%. We may see now with inflation and kind of, you know, lack of wafer, etc., the kind of prices may not decline as much, but we going to see much more price decline. Next slide. I just said in the beginning that I'm talking about investment. I just want to use this slide. I love it because kind of it's from Bloomberg. It says kind of there's going to be lots of investment into energy storage. I just want to make one point. You need to make energy storage bankable. And the way how to do this is we have a member, that's Munich Re insurance company. And what they did, they threw the kind of the storage, this was kind of battery storage, threw it from the balcony, you know, used a hammer, and they tested everything possible, what they could do. And after 2 years of kind of really intense research, they now have a product, an insurance product for batteries, which are and they guarantee for 10 years lifetime, you have the battery. And if the battery fails, you either get a new one within 1 day, or you're getting money from Munich Re. And that is kind of a very important step to make it bankable, because the banks need safety and security. That they kind of can be sure that they are getting the money back. Okay, next slide. This is one, our Swiss knife. That's kind of all the things you can do with energy storage. And this is not the full list. And we also have DSOs, so distribution net operators who are members. And we always jokingly say to them when we have a member gathering, you know, your grids only can do electricity is going through or not, energy storage can do more. I'm looking at the watch. We just kind of want to speed up a bit. Next slide. And that's the most important picture of my presentation. We need energy storage, very simple. You know, if you want to have the sun in the night, you need energy storage. Otherwise, it's hopeless. Okay, I think I just asked Leslie in terms of time. According to my watch, I'm just about there. Is that fine?
Yeah, if you would wrap up soon, I think we would be in good shape. Yeah, but feel free to take another minute.
One more minute. Okay, good. Okay, we go to the next slide. I just want briefly just go quickly through applications for energy storage. I already talked about decarbonization, integration of renewable energy. The next slide. And that's kind of also one very important slide we have. If you have no storage, but the solar panel on the roof, the self-consumption rate is about 35%. If you have storage, self-consumption rate is about 70%. And that's, I think, very important. Also, if you have flats which are rented out, if it's not your own, that could be kind of a future very interesting factor to make flats more valuable. Also applies to factories. Okay, next slide. Okay, that slide we can jump. Next slide. These are a few of our energy storage units. Most important number, we have now 500,000 home storage systems in 2022 installed. That's about 4.5 gigawatts. That's kind of, if you, in some counties, if you would connect all the home storage, you could have kind of your own factory. Okay, next slide. Again, next slide. We do have a large-scale storage market that's for factories. Very important is there managing and balancing the grid. Very important, as soon as you are producing something in the factory, doesn't matter if it's big or small, you always need reliable energy supply. And energy storage can help. If there's frequency issue, helps you to keep the frequency up. If you sometimes have short blackouts, then kind of, you have energy storage. Lots of people in the world use diesel generators, but more and more are swapping now to batteries to get energy saved. Okay, next slide. And I want to keep that as the last slide, otherwise I'm running really out of time. This is just kind of a map of Germany where you can see large-scale storage. 10 years ago, this map couldn't exist. It would be just a white map. And the reason why we thought we use a large-scale one, at least you can see some dots. With home storage, same thing. 10 years ago, you would have found kind of 6-7 locations with home storage, in a sufficient way. Nowadays, with 500,000, that looks very different. We have 2-3 members who are in this field. They really have Germany maps with kind of also home storage where they have it. But this is the implication of this slide, is to say there's lots of going on. It's kind of lots of dynamic, and my final sense about the regulatory affairs, what we see in Germany, and I see it all across the world, the market and the innovation is much, much faster than the regulation. And I think that is the positive message. So I would like to leave it there. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to pass on to questions or to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rosenthal, for highlighting the importance and the development of energy storage in Germany, and that German knife, so to say, not the Swiss knife, but the German knife of energy storage, famous slide by the BVS. I think that, also again underlines how, again, we as countries in our energy transition are just dependent on energy storage in similar levels. And of course, Puerto Rico is also pushing for the implementation of EV. So we're kind of on a similar pathway there of expanding our storage solutions. And we will hear a bit more about that on our panel later. But before we come to that, of course, I would like to open the stage for our panelists here for our German companies. So the first one that we will bring on is on active substances for the efficient operation of biogas plants. We will hear from HeGo Biotec. Leila Swences is the project engineer for this company. She's the representative of HeGo Biotec, and we will share our presentation here in a minute, showing the slides. Give us 1 second, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. So I start. Buenos días, Puerto Rico. Good morning, US, and good evening, Germany. Before I begin, I would like to briefly thank the US Chamber of Commerce for giving us the opportunity to present ourselves. And really, congratulations to the other panelists. It is always a good, an excellent opportunity to learn about other technologies and to be just updated. So I am Leila Suances. I am working, as Leslie said, as a project engineer. I am chemical engineer specialized in process. I am responsible for the markets of Spain, Portugal, and Latin America. We are based in Berlin, here in Germany. Our company is called HeGo Biotec International, hereafter HBI. Previously, we were called HeGo Biotec, but we have decided to create HBI in order to focus the international market in one entity, since we have been growing very solidly since 2015. So why we have applied to this event? HeGo Biotec has been exporting to Europe for many years, but since 2015, we have successfully expanded to the US. Now, this market is solid for us, and we think it's a very good time to jump to Latin America. What does our company do? We mainly export material in two sectors, gas treatment and water treatment. For the gas treatment, we have granulated and powdered iron hydroxide to desulfurize biogas, both in fermenter and also in downstream in a filter. We also desulfurize industrial gases like CO2 or synthesis gas. With regards to water treatment, we export granulated iron hydroxide for the removal of arsenic, phosphates, and heavy metals from water stream in drinking water and wastewater sectors. Our product came from the treatment of mine water. The production is 200 kilometers far away from where we are in Germany, so they are made in Germany products. They are natural products that are continuously tested in production to ensure a stable quality. Our product offers selective desulfurization, so removal from H2S. So what does it mean? They don't absorb or absorb in very small quantities other components such as siloxane or VOCs. They selectively absorb H2S. In this way, we can achieve very high capacities. Our company only does business abroad. To ensure a prompt delivery, we adapted to the customer's needs, making production more flexible and adapting to transport requirements. We offer both collection the material by the customer and also shipment. Next slide, please. We have some case studies. This is just one of them. In this case study, the aim is to clean biogas from the landfill in California. We had serious problem with pressure drop. As can be seen, they have two vessels for the gas cleaning. They had to stop the gas cleaning when they had to change the filter media. However, after using our material, they were able to reduce the pressure drop, and for the first time, they were able to pass all the gas through one filter while they are changing the other. By decreasing the pressure drop, as you can see, you decrease also the cost. At this point, I just like to add that we have for the desulfurization process mainly two products, granulated products. One that operates with humidities around 70 to 80, and the other for humidities from 40 to 60. We also have 3 grain size for these two products, 2 to 4 millimeters, 2 to 8, and 5 to 25 millimeters. This allows us to be able to place our product in very wide range of plant conditions, as you probably imagine. Just to finish, I want to address your attention in 3 main points. Our product can be seen, can be used with or without oxygen. That depending on Puerto Rico regulation, the low-added product can be used as a fertilizer additive, avoiding landfill cost, and that our company performs 2 analyses. Analysis of the low-added sample if the customer wishes in order to see how our product performs. I am the one who carry out this kind of analysis and then report it to the customer. And we have also a laboratory where we test our products in with a very wide range of conditions. So thank you very much for your attention, and I really hope we can do a good business in Puerto Rico. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Leila. And again, to highlight what we've been talking about in the chat a little bit, while biogas is still small in Puerto Rico, we are seeing it expand currently, and we really see this as a future solution or part of the energy mix in Puerto Rico. And we're really excited to have such a bandwidth, so to say, of renewables on this delegation, so that we, we have solar energy, we have wind energy represented, biomass, storage solutions, and biogas. So we have the whole bandwidth. And with that, I would already like to hand over to our next representative, Mr. Stefan Valentin, Head of Business Development at VPD, which is a globally active wind energy company. And while wind energy is already a part of Puerto Rico's energy mix, there was, as we heard earlier, studies ongoing to evaluate even the potential for offshore wind, which is really interesting also for Puerto Rico. Yeah, we're interested in hearing more about how that could also be a solution for Puerto Rico's path to 100% renewables. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie, and I'm also very pleased to take part here in this nice event. And as Leslie already introduced me, I am here, I have the honor to speak to present WPD. We are a German-based developer and also investor of renewable energies, mainly in the wind energy, but we are also doing PV. We, as a typical developer, we cover the whole project development chain, beginning with greenfield analysis, going over to the structuring and financing, then tendering, and the construction we are doing by itself, making also the PPAs. And then after the finishing of the construction procedure, we intend to also operate mainly the projects that we have been built by our own. So therefore, WPD is not only a developer, it's also a kind of investor and an independent power producer. Our worldwide track record is currently about more than 5 gigawatts of installed capacity. And currently we have almost 3,500 members of staff all over the world, are present in 30 countries, and have currently still a very big project pipeline of about 14 giga wind onshore, 30 gigawatts wind offshore worldwide, and also coming more and more strong, more than 2 gigawatts of PV that we are trying to develop all over the world. And so therefore we have not like a product to sell, but for sure we are looking for business opportunities and also in Latin America now. And this has a reason. Please change to the next slide. Insofar we have been active only in Latin America, only in Chile. And in Chile, just this year, we just finished the construction of South America's biggest wind farm. It's HeGo wind farm in the south of Chile, of 77 turbines. And the unique thing of HeGo wind farm, it's not only the size, but it's also the location, that it's located in the Araucanía region, which is which is characterized by the presence of a significant number of indigenous communities, especially also in our project area. And we managed, although the historical conflict between these indigenous settlements and communities and the state of Chile is very historical and continues until today, we managed in a good relationship to them to construct this wind farm, and now are starting to run the wind farm as well, with very good results in the first months of the operation of this wind farm. So now after this success in Chile, now we take the opportunity to look also in other countries in Latin America, and therefore this the German-Puerto Rican Energy Conference is a good opportunity. Who are we looking for? We are for sure looking for sites for potential large-scale PV or wind power plants, and also looking for local partners for cooperation, mainly in project development, for doing studies, doing land acquiring, but also for maybe even acquiring projects in a pre-development state to then continue together or continue by our own. This is in a glance from WPD. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Valentin. I think you perfectly summarized again what our companies are basically looking for in Puerto Rico, and I can only encourage everyone who's listening in and who maybe a stakeholder in the energy market in Puerto Rico to, if you're interested in particularly in talking to any of our companies, again, please feel free to reach out to us directly. We will also upload all of our companies' contact information online, but in the meantime, you can reach out to us directly via info@GACCSouth.com. And yeah, we would be happy to facilitate any meetings, of course, and also any questions for our speakers that we are not able to address today. And we will try to, if there's a little bit of time at the end of the event, of course, to address any questions. But for now, I am announcing our last delegate for today, and this is Easy Smart Grid, represented by Dr. Thomas Walter, the CEO of this company, and he will present on low-cost energy through solutions for flexible consumption of energy. And this is a very exciting technology that has also already been showcased in Germany, but we will hear more about this in a second from Dr. Walter. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Leslie. Can you hear me? Is my microphone working?
Bright and clear.
Thank you. So I have the privilege to be the last speaker today. So you know everything about renewable energy and batteries. So I thought about what I could be talking about that might excite you. Can we have a next slide, please? So my background in energy was in a solar PV developer until 2014. You know that we had a big solar crisis in Germany in these years, and many of the companies that had developed had to stop business. So what I do now was inspired by a project we did on the Maldives. So they are islands just like Puerto Rico. They are a bit smaller, I would say. There are 300,000 people on 100 islands. And we were actually feeding solar energy into diesel grids. And even though the cost of PV electricity already at that time was half that of diesel, so that was 25 cents per kilowatt hours as opposed to 50 cents for diesel electricity, we could not inject more than 10% of PV because then grids became unstable. And that is not something the people there liked. So we started thinking about how we could actually increase the share of solar energy. And this is how I came to the subject that I'm working on today. Easy Smart Grid was founded in 2014 to focus on just this challenge, knowing that solar and PV and wind would come, but flexibility technologies were required in order to actually migrate energy systems to 100% renewable. So what we are doing in a very simple way is to combine engineering concepts of grid control and economic concepts of local energy markets to actually integrate demand-side flexibility in a grid supportive, efficient, and as I heard today, very importantly, resilient way. Now, in doing that, we address two major challenges that we talked about today a lot. It's about the cost of storage. I was pleased to hear that battery costs had dropped by a factor of 4 in the presentation by my colleague before. But if you can actually replace batteries by demand-side flexibility, you can achieve a factor of 100. For example, if you are having heating loads, as we have in Germany, this number of 100 comes from a Danish professor, and you know that Denmark has gone very far in decarbonizing its heating. If you shift your flexibility, the charging of your car, it doesn't cause any physical costs. So the potential for low-cost storage is huge. But also the second challenge is, how do you actually manage an energy grid which is based on renewable energy, which is not as controllable as fossil power plants were. Now, what sets us apart from others? We received the Good Practice Award of the year 2021 for our demo project, which Leslie mentioned, by the International Renewables Grid Initiative. Now, this is an international collaboration of grid operators and environmental organizations that actually works on overcoming the earlier conflict between environmentalists who wanted more renewables and grid operators who said they're dangerous and they cause problems, to actually find solutions. Also, what we are doing is patent protected in the United States for this combination of transactive and microgrid elements. And that means in the third block that we can transfer our know-how fully. So we are not trying to keep any secrets. We're trying to expose and transfer our know-how to local partners, because they will be the ones who are asked in case of difficulties, and they need the answers and they need to develop the business. While we think there are many other countries that have the same challenges, that want to go to 100% renewables, and our role will be to develop the existing solutions further and to also encourage exchange of experience. There are countries with a lot of solar, there are countries with a lot of wind, there are countries with heating needs, and there are countries with cooling needs, and countries with desalination plants. They all have different requirements, but together they can learn from each other. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, this is where we've done it. This is a typical German residential area with individual houses, in this case, semi-detached houses. It's in the south of Germany, near Lake Constance on the Swiss border. It's a very sunny area. Unfortunately, in the area, wind power is not allowed. On Lake Constance, it's allowed to sail on boats, but it's not allowed to put up windmills. But the ambition of the project developer was to have the greenest residential quarter. And that's not only because of our technology, but also because of the construction. It's made from wood, it's highly insulated, it's a small footprint on the surface. Now, the objective that we are going to reach there is to increase the self-consumption of this quarter of some 25 families living there, from the 50% you would normally have to the 80% that you could also achieve with batteries, but we achieve it just by charging the electric vehicles when the sun is shining, shifting the operation of a dishwasher 2 times when the sun is shining, and doing that in a fully automated way. So there's software in these devices that controls it. Now, to give you a flavor of what we are doing, there are more than 100 individual flexible elements. So there are 12 heat pumps, there's a CHP, there are up to 24 electric vehicles, there are 100 household appliances, and there are also some batteries there that need to be coordinated. And how do you coordinate a large number? You do it with market economies and not with central control. So we use something which is required by European regulation for local energy communities, dynamic tariffs. I think in the United States, you rather use the term of transactive, and of course, fully automated response. And what we are looking for is to scale this for more and other flex, like wind energy, industrial applications like cooling instead of heating, and also for industrial sites and for grid sections. You could call it microgrids, you could call it enhanced distribution grids. And at the left hand side, you see the award of the Renewables Grid initiative, which we're very proud of. Thank you, and looking forward to questions and discussions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walter, for presenting this very innovative and interesting technology that I think would be an excellent solution for Puerto Rico, is, based on what we learned about kind of the IRP today and the future solutions for the island. With that, I'd already like to go over to our moderated panel discussion. Our moderator for today is Markus Rosenthal, that we already heard from earlier from the German Storage Association. And I would like to ask all of our panelists to turn on their camera to participate in the discussion. We will switch off our slides for this part so that we can all see each other and start an interesting conversation, hopefully. And with that, Mr. Rosenthal, the stage is yours. You're still muted.
Thank you very much. And thank you for all the very interesting presentations. I would suggest we have about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to discuss and to make our points. Maybe I would suggest that we focus on, first of all, on very straightforward questions in terms of, and I would like to ask sorry, I don't have the names here on my list. From Easy Smart Grid, that's Mr. Walter.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask in terms of you just set up your company about, that was 2014, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah. In terms of looking back from the starting point to now, and then take it a long-term view into the future. Do you think your technology that's going to be a game changer in the energy world, or is it a niche market which you are serving?
Oh, it's a very, thank you for the question, but it's a very dangerous question.
I know. I've been here to moderate.
Well, I think actually it's a game changer. I mean, in my professional life, I've been going through the transformation from the analog telecom system to the internet, and there was a game change. But the bad thing about game changes is that there are many players who don't like it because they have to change. So what we are showing is both that you can use it as a game changer. So I would love to discuss with people in Puerto Rico about the long-term plans where we think we can contribute. But it's also a very concrete application which you can do today. The community, for example, that has done it in Germany is a private community. So we are not affected by regulation. They are just trying something they can do without asking somebody. So it's both.
Good. Thank you very much. And I would ask Stefan Wallenstein, you gave also very interesting view about, think about energy, very interesting that you are more or less across the world. My simple question starting point is from Puerto Rican point of view. When they speak to you, are they speaking with a company with global experience, and how can you bring this experience to Puerto Rico?
Yeah, for sure. That we have to look on the special demands of Puerto Rico that we have there. But this situation is very special, as we just heard during the different speeches that we had today. But for sure, planning a power plant in wind energy or in PV energy, and making all the steps towards to have it construction ready, then financing and constructed. This is for sure a competence that we have executed in many countries, and we will be also able to do this in Puerto Rico as well, if the conditions are the right for that. So I'm very positive that this competence that we have developed in other countries will apply also here.
Okay, very good. I have one more question. I recently talked to a German wind generation or power plant, wind power plant project developer, and he said the German wind farms or the kind of the production of the windmills kind of that is not as competitive as it has been in the past, and especially South America is now producing the products which are needed and for a very good, valuable price. Maybe you can talk about this briefly, or if you have any assessment on this.
But I did not get the question completely.
The question is kind of the basic message was South American windmill producers or wind generation kind of producers are now offering kind of very good value for money. And therefore, the German windmill production itself is feeling the competition from a global scale.
Okay. So you're asking more, let's say, like the suppliers of wind turbines.
Wind turbines, yeah.
It's for that end. Yeah.
And South America seems to be the hotspot now, where it's produced.
Not for production, not too much, because there for sure we have some production facilities of some wind turbine producers in Brazil especially, but for example for the Chilean projects, mainly the turbine parts, the bigger parts, industrial parts came from China, okay. So it's more about are the European-based turbine producers and suppliers, are they competitive in the South American markets? And that's true, we are. Yeah, it's like this worldwide names like Vestas or Nordex or others. Yeah, they are competing on South American markets with a good success. So there's no doubt about that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I now want to go to. I want to go to Leila Zuansis. I hope I pronounced your name, Leila, in the right way. Your full name? Yeah, okay, exactly. Thank you very much. Yeah. So when I was preparing for the moderation, I checked the webpage of your company, and I realized kind of you have a very kind of interesting starting point, kind of rather focusing on very detailed work in terms of really biotech analyzes, bacteria, etc. Possibly you could tell us a bit more about kind of your personal role and kind of how do you see kind of the biogas market is going to develop? I think taking
about my personal role.
Sorry?
You asked me about my personal role in the company?
Yes, that would be interesting because I have a few more questions, but kind of I think that would be helpful because kind of your company is doing so many things. When I checked the webpage, I was very impressed kind of what they all doing.
Yeah. So the role of the company, they offer a very wide range of services in the renewable environmental sector. I mean, we have how it's called, canal nets.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of we have more than gas treatment and water treatment. We also sell devices for the biogas field. I mean, we sell gas warming devices, stack analyzer, test tube for gas measurement. But our main focus in the export field is gas treatment and water treatment with our products. These other services are like peripheral services that we cannot really sell it abroad because will be more expensive for our potential clients or our clients, because this kind of services or devices need some maintenance as well, and will be very expensive for our clients. Most of our suppliers have subsidiaries in these lands. Okay. And we are very pleased to share the contact. Yeah, on research if they have some subsidiaries in the specific land. But export, we only sell products for gas treatment and water treatment. Maybe in the future that change, but not now.
Okay, well, thank you very much, because I think that helps also from the Puerto Rican side to get a better understanding what they can expect regarding your products. Oh yeah, good. Okay, just saw a message here. So I want to turn to Robin Burton. Robin, you are kind of representing now more or less the government, if I may say so. My big question is always when I, I work for a trade association in contact with the government. I just would like to hear, do you think kind of the overall policy mood has changed in favor of innovative government policy towards renewable energy, storage, develop new markets in this field? I just think kind of that would be also very interesting to hear in terms of how is the mood?
Thanks for the question. I'm not sure if I'm exactly qualified to answer it. I can certainly speak to what the National Renewable Energy Laboratory is doing as far as analysis and modeling in support of Puerto Rico's energy future. I would say that it's always beneficial to have an administration that's supportive of renewable energy. I'm talking about the federal administration, renewable energy, energy justice, and really providing support to build a more resilient energy future for Puerto Rico. So yeah, operating in that environment has certainly been beneficial.
Mm-hmm. And if you kind of, if you would kind of, if you could decide what would be kind of the next policy of tomorrow, what would it be? Or the key focus, what should be this key emphasis?
Sure. I think that what I'll say is I applaud the people of Puerto Rico for enacting Act 17 and really charting a very clear course based on self-determination toward an ambitious energy future. So I would say I think I'm better situated to support the people of Puerto Rico and their own self-determination of what they want their energy future to be, rather than speculate on additional policies.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I think what's really interesting about Puerto Rico is, as we're talking about an island, it has so many potential, and also kind of there's because kind of we have lots of companies which are really focusing on the island market. What you can always see is kind of very good testing ground to test pilot schemes, and if they start to operate in a successful way on an island, then it's only a question of time until it's copied and used somewhere else. I just got a question from Nico at DexGrid for EasySmart Grid. I may just go to Thomas and just read it out. How is the user onboarding handled, and how do tractions settle? I find it difficult to read the question. Maybe Nico, you could ask the question.
Our attendees will not be speaking during the conference.
Okay, so it
well,
doesn't.
I think I understood some of it. I already commented on it on the chat. Okay. So I can I can just repeat. So first part, we did not onboard the users, but we were onboarded because they looked for a solution, because they wanted to increase self-sufficiency, and they found our approach interesting. Secondly, the user just sets the constraints. So I want my dishwasher ready by 5 p.m. because then I'll come home, and it goes for the cheapest price by software. And the transaction can be settled by just multiplying a dynamic price with the energy. You can do that every second, every 10 seconds, every minute, any 15 minutes, whatever you like. And that is a very easy way of settling the transaction.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. Just very, very, I think, very clear answer. Okay. I just want to go back to Stefan. Just I want to ask one question because it's also an issue, I think also now across the world on onshore and offshore. If you look at Puerto Rico, where do you see more potential? Onshore, offshore, is this kind of something? I mean, it's always a question kind of how much infrastructure you need and how much, investments.
Yeah, also what other impacts that we have for sure in Puerto Rico has a very, let's say, dense population already, which will for sure make it could face some challenges for developing further onshore wind farms. Although onshore wind farms is still significantly cheaper than offshore winds. So so therefore this will be the challenge here. I just heard about that offshore could be attractive for Puerto Rico. That was I guess PJ Wilson was mentioning it. That's also something that just has to be proven. For sure with wind measurements. What's why is this supposed big difference between land wind speeds and water wind speeds? There are other examples that we don't there were supposings like this, but they have never been proved afterwards. So and also in a country, let's say quite small, like it is Puerto Rico, all the challenges which are coming with offshore wind development, like for sure also port infrastructure and so on. Then further on the operations facilities, which are not so easy to implement and to run. This is a challenge, and also what I just learned now during this conference and the preparation. What we see currently, and what also PJ Wilson was presenting, this kind of supporting scheme that is now implemented with this kind of tenders that we see here in Puerto Rico. It's for sure when you look on the timelines that are foreseen for the realization afterwards for the projects, it's only orientated to PV. With 20 months of project realization, you don't manage to order any onshore or offshore wind turbine, to get them installed in this before the deadline. So this is also economically and for the regulations, I would see the challenge, but this is a challenge that a lot of countries have to face, and so why not also in the later future?
I may have a second question regarding that's always important in terms of financing and the role of government. How do you see kind of, if you get new projects, do you think that's going to be mainly by the government, or is it kind of a mixture between private sector and government, or focus on private sector, possibly with investors who are interested?
Yeah, as you know, from there we had to, let's say, suffer a lot from the European, especially from the German perspective, as the feed-in tariff system was finished, and now we are changing to, for sure, Germany also to a kind of support scheme, and the kind of support scheme we also see here now to be implemented in Puerto Rico, but also a PPA-based financing with this industrial backbone that Puerto Rico has. I see there are some possibilities and some opportunities. Which is also, in my opinion, a kind of a big difference to other, let's see, Caribbean countries. Just the strong industrial backbone in the pharmaceutical industry mainly. So I guess there will be PPA clients also for bigger projects. So, so I see the opportunities for sure.
I think that's very interesting. Possibly you just could tell in 2 sentences what PPA is. Possibly not everybody knows, but I think it's very decisive and instinct for everybody.
It's called it means a power purchase agreement, meaning a kind of agreement between a power producer and an off-taker for a certain time, at least 10 years in our large scale plant business, to take the energy off for a certain price.
Okay, I think that's helpful. And then I turn to Thomas. Is PPA, is that something which is instinct for you? Obviously.
You mean me?
Thomas, yeah.
Power purchase agreement, this is not really of relevance to what we do. basically, our system tries to optimize the energy use above or across all types of generation and all types of consumption. In the demo project, for example, as you mentioned it, which is located on Lake Constance, where you cannot put up windmills, one of the concepts is to have a PPA with a remote location and to virtually integrate it into the concept, so that, for example, you say we buy 10% of this windmill and it's integrated as a flexible generation, but that is not implemented, but it could be done.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's very interesting. I think the reason why I asked for the PPA is because it kind of offers basically guarantees for the project developer, like Stefan, on the one hand. On the other hand, for the client, shall it be industry? Shall it be even real estate? Housing companies, etc. And I think kind of that makes it interesting, and it's kind of a new way how to finance it. And I think kind of also for Puerto Rico, always interesting to understand the different ways how you can get the right financial setting for what you want to achieve. Good. I think we are coming to an end now. If there are any questions, I can't see anything in the chat. I see there's an ongoing debate between Nico and Thomas in the chat. Okay, I think
maybe I can take over. I'm happy to take over, because there actually was one earlier question in the chat that we didn't get to address, if you don't mind.
Yes,
and this is a more general question. While we still have 2 minutes, maybe this is a good opportunity also, not only for the participants of this panel, but also the last panel, taking advantage of the fact that we have such a wide bandwidth of companies and types of companies on this panel. The question is, and this is very general, but how long does it take in Germany to implement a typical renewable energy project from conceptualization and design to project delivery? Now, keep in mind, this is very, very crucial because in Puerto Rico, we are under, I don't want to use the word time pressure, but projects are very time sensitive because they are bound to incentives on the island. Under the project funding that is available on the island, especially for utility scale projects. And there is no typical project, but maybe you do have kind of averages and maybe we can hear this from a biomass perspective, wind, and a solar perspective. Maybe just like very roughly to get an idea of maybe how long these projects would take for an implementation in Germany.
Stefan.
If anyone.
I think that's Stefan is the first to answer that.
In the wind onshore sector, if it goes very fast, then it's 3 years. I would say the average is maybe 4.5, but there are also projects which took 8 or 9 years for development. PV for sure, also in Germany goes much more faster now. Also big, large scale PV. Or maybe they have 1.5 year. That's my experience.
Okay, I think that's helpful. I think that probably answers the question in regards to wind energy. Maybe Herr Daniel or Frau Gottke. Herr Walter is also, Mr. Walter is also raising his hand, so maybe he would like to say something.
Well, maybe not a concrete number, but maybe I should point out that we just changed our government in order to shorten the project development times, because before we had a government whose main interest seemed to be to make them lengthy and complicated. Now we have one who's stated a program to shorten the times. So that's not a year's number, but I mean, given your policy support, that should be helpful.
Yeah, and of course, this is a very, very broad question. There is no typical project, and then it also totally depends on where you set up and what kind of type of technology you're speaking about. But again, if you have any more kind of precise questions for any of our companies, feel free to send them to us. I've posted our email address several times in the chat, so please refer there if you have kind of more specific questions for speakers. And now, without wanting to kind of rush this, I would like to bring our second panel to an end and open the stage for our closing remarks, because we are already at the end of our conference almost. And I am very proud and honored to announce our speaker, Kenneth Davison McClintock Hernandez. He is the former Secretary of State of Puerto Rico and currently a senior public policy advisor at Polytank. Mr. McClintock has a very long career in public service, politics, and government relations, and he has authored or co-authored many acts that are relevant in U.S. politics today. So with that, I am very, very honored to open the stage for him now, and we look forward to your closing remarks on our international collaboration for resilient energy. Mr. McClintock, thank you so much. You're still muted. Please unmute yourself.
I thought you did that. But anyway, thank you, Leslie, and the other organizers for inviting me to offer closing remarks today. As we've heard since earlier today, Manuel Laboy's presentation, this is a very timely moment to hold this event. Puerto Rico is at a critical junction with $9 to $10 billion allocated by the federal government to redo in some way or form our electric grid. We also have access to compete for additional funds to finance offshore wind generation and other renewable energy projects, not specifically directed to Puerto Rico, but made available nationwide. As we've seen, several $1 billion are being allocated to rebuild the transmission grid. The question is, why rebuild the transmission grid? If we can replace one of our old misplaced South Coast generating plants with distributed energy on the rooftops of the North Coast, you no longer need to repair or replace some of the 230 megawatt or 115 megawatt cables to connect a South Coast generator to North Coast consumers. The money you can save there can be repositioned in the budget to subsidize solar panel installation and move us much closer to 100% energy, renewable energy by the year 2050. While we have a few solar farms using agricultural lands, especially in the Southeast and the Northwest, as we saw in PJ's presentation, we should be seeking to use rooftops in Puerto Rico's built-up surfaces to place photovoltaic panels. Incredibly, no government agency, neither the Energy Bureau, PREPA, nor the Statistics Institute, generates data on what percentage of our built-up surface, or what in Spanish we call superficie edificada, is used to place PV panels and protecting our farms for food production instead of using them for solar generation. The so-called fossil cartel, which really exists in Puerto Rico, has profited over half a century from the sale of oil to PREPA, making Puerto Rico the only US jurisdiction that generates power mostly from oil and now other fossil fuels such as coal and natural gas. It is still resisting the move that Germany began years ago towards renewables and resilient energy. Worse yet, thanks to that cartel, all of Puerto Rico's fuel purchases, all are foreign sourced. None of the fuel purchases are domestic and virtually never have been over the past 80 years. And people really can't believe that fact, but it is true. One of the excuses for that is that the Jones Shipping Act of 1920 requires that domestic purchases be shipped on Jones Act domestic vessels. That is true. It is also true that PREPA nor the local government ever mounted an effective effort to carve out an exception to the Jones Act, as was successfully done in the 1970s to carve out an exception for foreign flag cruise ships to serve American ports in Puerto Rico. If an effort were made, perhaps we could get a carve out so that foreign ships could transport fuel from the mainland to Puerto Rico. And if not, then we should create the market for the construction of such ships under the American flag so that we can purchase American fuel for American power generation in Puerto Rico. If one conclusion we can agree upon today is that German energy companies have arrived in Puerto Rico at the right time. You have arrived at a critical juncture where Puerto Rico has to decide whether its power infrastructure will be more of the same or whether it will aspire to become America's first green energy jurisdiction, and whether we will take our usual place at the end of the line or whether we will become a regional leader in the Caribbean. Over 10 years ago, Secretary of Energy Chu and Secretary of State Clinton endorsed the concept of creating a Caribbean energy grid based in Puerto Rico, where the United States becomes a Caribbean nation, to connect all of the Caribbean in a resilient, interdependent, and redundant energy grid that would protect us all from natural disasters and provide cheaper, more reliable power. Although it attracted attention and support from the World Bank, it never got off the ground for lack of a real sponsor and the opposition from Venezuela's Petrocaribe and other oil cartels, including PREPAs. Unfortunately, in our capitalist society, which I support, good ideas have a better chance of moving forward if they have a sponsor who has a strong economic interest in an idea. The Caribbean energy grid lacks idea lacks that strong economic support. There are enough funds allocated to Puerto Rico to devote a small portion of those funds to explore new technologies such as ocean thermal energy conversion, OTEC, which has been in the experimental stage in Hawaii for a quarter century and could be tested in ideal spots previously researched in Southeast Puerto Rico as well as Northwest Puerto Rico. Also, if there is any future in exploring power generation through the kinetics of ocean waves, Puerto Rico has a lot of waves galore, especially off its north coast. As you seek opportunities to do business in Puerto Rico, while we prepare to undo the damage caused by Hurricane Maria 5 years ago, perhaps your businesses, as well as the German government, should take a step beyond the important momentum developed today to urge our national government, the Biden administration, to make more flexible use of the $9 to $10 billion already allocated to turn first Puerto Rico and then the Caribbean into a world region that becomes greener than any other, with the assistance of German business entities, such as those represented here today, as well as those that are going to find out that they missed out on an opportunity because they weren't here today, as well as more diversity in sources of renewable and resilient energies. Once again, thank you all for participating, sponsoring, and organizing this groundbreaking forum today. And I can promise you that if Leslie organizes another event such as this in Puerto Rico, we will have the coffee break that we missed today, but with real Puerto Rican coffee. Danke.
Thank you so very much, Senator McClintock. We really appreciate your closing remarks, and to maybe pick on up on what you just said. We are, of course, doing our very best to hopefully make this event a reality in person in the not too far away future. That would be also, of course, in our interest. And maybe to just recap on everything we heard today and the great input that we received. Maybe as a bottom line, I think whether it's 3% renewable energies or 40% renewable energies, Puerto Rico and Germany have a common goal. They have similar goals, and our way to achieving this goal, we also are facing common issues. And we are all aware that renewables are not just better for the environment, but also, at the end of the day, cheaper and safer. And we are so proud of making this part of our mission. And today, our mission was to connect German businesses to the US market. And I think we did so very successfully. We hope that you all enjoyed our program. And of course, a big, big thank you to all of our fantastic speakers and to our delegates. We couldn't have done any of this without you. And I think we're all such a vital part to this journey. And last but not least, thank you so much to my wonderful team, to the colleagues, to our CEO for providing the remarks, for my colleague Lukas Nittenlaub, who is here supporting on the tech end, and also Anthony Hahn supporting as well, and Jona Rowold, of course, and our excellent consulting director, Michaela Schobat, and Hanno Sellinger also in the background as an IT support. It's just me here providing the moderation remarks, but of course, this is all a team effort that has been going on for many, many weeks, and we are so happy to bring this format to you today and hope that, again, you enjoyed it. And with that, I think we are almost landing on time. We even have a little bit of time left if there are any closing remarks or questions from anyone else, but otherwise I would say enjoy the rest of your day or your evening, because in Germany we're already heading towards the later part of the day. Thank you very much, everyone.